drift back to an age when the very concept of normal was radically different. Imagine, for a moment, the soft embrace of your modern mattress, the gentle hum of electricity, a distant memory. You are not in your familiar room, a digital clock. Instead, a rough, straw-filled pallet presses against your back. The air thick with the earthy scent of damp soil, wood smoke, and something vaguely animalistic. Sunlight, thin and watery, as the gloom through a gap in the wattle. And daub walls of your dwelling, your eyes, to the crisp clarity of high-definition screens squint against the dimness. This is not a dreamscape constructed for comfort. This is the stark, unvarnished reality of a medieval serf circa the year 1086, in the heart of England, shortly after the Norman conquest, singing tales of chivalrous knights and fair maidens in sun-drenched castles. Your life, find yourself abruptly transplanted, would be a relentless cycle of toil, punctuated by the gnawing anxieties of survival. Notions we often project onto the past are as ephemeral as morning mist, dissolving upon closer inspection to reveal a foundation of grit, grime, and sheer, unadulterated mundanity. Familiar as you push yourself up, the coarse weave of your tunic scratching against your skin. It's made of undyed wool, scratchy and utilitarian, smelling faintly of sweat and the sheep from which it came. Your feet bare and calloused, packed earth floor. There's no soft carpet, no polished wood. The hut is small as a single room shared with your family and, perhaps, or a sleeping dog. The smoky haze from the central hearth, where a meager fire smoulders, stings your eyes. The smell of burning peat is pervasive, a constant companion. Your breakfast, if you can call it that, is a hunk of coarse, dark bread, barley or rye, hard and dense, washed down, with a draught of ale watered down, of course. Water was a luxury few peasants could reliably access. The ale, though, was safer than water, some of the nastier microbes. This simple meal, consumed without ceremony, fuel for a day that will be dominated by labor. Your first task, even before the sun has fully crested the horizon, is to attend to the needs of the lord of the manor, William the Conqueror's appointed Baron Fitzwilliam of the fictional manor of Oakhaven. You are a villain tied to this land, your labor belonging to your lord. The day in the lord's fields, tending to his crops, wheat, barley, oats, with tools that are rudimentary at best. A heavy wooden plough, pulled by a weary ox, will be your primary instrument of cultivation. The soil is heavy, often clay-heavy, requires immense physical exertion. You'll be planting seeds by hand, weeding meticulously, and later, during harvest, you'll be scything the grain, binding it into sheaves, all under the watchful eye of the reeve, the Lord's overseer. His voice, sharp and impatient, will be a constant presence. "Hurry now, you lazy dog," bellows Thomas the reeve, his face ruddy from the sun and his temper. He carries a stout stick, not for punishment just yet, but as a visible reminder of his authority. No man, nor for any serf. You nod, your shoulders already aching, your hands beginning to blister. Your wife, Eleanor, whose hands are as rough as yours from years of similar labor, joins you, small bundle of tools and her own meager midday meal. She will be working alongside you, her days just as demanding. Eleanor asks, her voice strained. "It seemed a bit weak yesterday." "Why?" you reply, sweat from your brow with the back of your hand. "It's still breathing. Pray God it makes it through the day." One less mouth to feed, less source of precious lard. The fear for your family's well-being is a constant undercurrent. A bad harvest means starvation. An epidemic, like the sweating sickness that would plague later centuries, could wipe out your entire family in days. To call no hospitals to attend. A broken bone might mean a lifetime of disability, if not death. The nearest priest lives in a small stone church a mile away, and his skills are limited to spiritual solace and perhaps a poultice of herbs. The routine becomes familiar as you observe the subtle hierarchies even amongst the peasantry. Those who manage to acquire an extra ox, who have a larger family to contribute labor, might eke out a slightly more comfortable existence. But the vast majority live on the edge, dictated by the seasons, the whims of their lord, and the ever-present threat of famine or disease. In the Domesday Book, the comprehensive survey commissioned by William the Conqueror in 1086, many villages had a significant portion of their land designated as demesne, land directly controlled by the lord. Worked by the serfs, this meant your own meagre strip of land, the one that fed your family, only after the lord's obligations were met. This wasn't a life of quiet contemplation or artistic pursuit of relentless, back-breaking physical labor, a constant struggle for survival. The afternoon wears on, the sun beating down relentlessly. Your muscles scream in protest, your throat is parched, you dream of water, cool and pure. Only available liquid is more of the same weak ale. The midday meal is a repeat of breakfast bread. A bit of cheese if you've been lucky, and onions. No meat unless it's a rare occasion. A feast day. You've managed to snare a rabbit from the Lord's woods, a dangerous act. Poaching that could earn you severe punishment. The sounds of the field are the grunts of the oxen, the rhythmic swish of scythers, the occasional shouted command, the distant bleating of sheep. The texture of your world is rough, the earth under your fingernails, the coarse fabric against your skin, the splintery wood of your tools. As the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the fields, you gather your meagre tools, for the Lord is done, but your own labor is far from over. You must tend to your own small patch of land, own meagre crops, mend your hut, and prepare for another day just like this one. The sheer sameness of it all is perhaps the most crushing aspect. There is no upward mobility, no chance of advancement. You are born a serf, and you die as a serf. Your children will likely follow the same path. Weekend or vacation is utterly alien. The closest you might get to a break is a religious festival, and even then continues, albeit with a slight change in focus. The routine becomes familiar as you walk back to your hut. Wood smoke, now mixed with the aroma of simmering pottage, a thick stew of vegetables and grains, peasant diet. Your body aches with a deep fatigue that no amount of modern stretching or massage could alleviate. You look at your hands, chapped and calloused of manual labor. This is not the vibrant, exciting past often depicted in popular culture, reality of the vast majority of people who lived in medieval England, a life of quiet desperation and relentless toil. As you sit by the hearth, the flickering firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls, can't help but feel a profound sense of boredom, a deep, soul-crushing tedium that underpins every aspect of your existence. There's little respite. The straw pallet is lumpy, and the darkness is absolute, broken only by the faint glow of embers, distant howl of a wolf, or the rustle of vermin in the thatch. Sleep comes, but it is often a restless thing, filled with the anxieties of the coming day, and tomorrow you will wake up and do it all again. The sheer, unvarnished monotony of it all is the true shock. It's a life lived in the shadow of the Lord, dictated by the seasons, defined by the endless, grinding cycle of labor. But what if even within this bleak existence, unexpected connection? What if the shared hardship forged bonds, stronger than any modern social media network? Joining us next time as we delve into the surprisingly rich tapestry of peasant community life, exploring the subtle ways these individuals found meaning and resilience amidst the crushing weight of their medieval reality. Your smartphone weighs more than some of the most precious possessions of this era. Think about that for a moment. The sleek and metal rectangle in your pocket, capable of holding libraries of information, connecting you to anyone, anywhere, is an object of unimaginable power compared to the rough and meager possessions that defined existence for most people in the year of our Lord 1189. You're not in your comfortable bed, crisp linens and supportive mattress. You're not even on a straw pallet in a relatively clean room. You are somewhere else. Shock. The first thing that assaults you is the smell. It's a thick, cloying miasma, a potent blend of damp earth, animal musk, and something vaguely acrid like stale urine and decomposing refuse. It clings to the air, heavy and inescapable, tongue and making your stomach churn. You try to breathe through your mouth, but even that offers little relief. Flutter open, but the light is dim, filtered through gaps in a rough, hewn thatch roof. Weak shafts of sunlight illuminating the cramped, low-ceilinged space. The walls are made of wattle and daub, a crude mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung plastered onto a woven framework. It's damp, too. You can feel a chill seeping through the thin, scratchy fabric that covers you. This isn't linen, it's rough-spun wool against your skin, smelling faintly of sweat and wood smoke. Your hands, when you raise them, are not the smooth hands you're accustomed to. They are rough, stained, and the nails are broken and dirty. You flex your fingers, ache radiates from your joints. You attempt to sit up, and the movement is stiff, awkward. The floor beneath you is packed earth, uneven and cold. You can feel the grit pressing into your back and legs. The sound that finally registers, frantic thumping of your own heart, is the lowing of cattle and the distant crowing of a rooster. A dog barks somewhere nearby, a sharp yapping sound. These are not the sounds of the modern world, the sounds of a life intrinsically tied to the rhythms of nature, to the needs of livestock, and the turning of the seasons. Experience becomes your teacher, and your first lesson is the overwhelming physicality of this new existence. Consciousness observing history, you are into it, experiencing it through a body that feels unfamiliar, worn, resilient. You push yourself up, your limbs protesting. The room, if you can even call it that, is Spartan. Wooden stool, a crude wooden chest, and a sleeping area marked by a simple straw-filled sack. Yourself. There are no windows, only the gaps in the roof and a small, dark opening that might serve as a door. You stumble towards the opening, your bare feet sinking slightly into the damp earth. As you emerge, force of the outside world hits you. The air is cooler, carrying the scent of damp hay and manure. You are in a small, enclosed yard. Similar wattle and daub structures, some with thatched roofs, others with what appears to be rough wooden shingles, curls lazily from a few of them, carrying the smell of burning wood. A few chickens peck at the ground nearby, ruffled and dusty. In the distance, you can see fields stretching out under a pale grey sky. They are not neatly manicured lawns, they are rough, uneven plots of land, some fallow, others showing the green shoots of early crops. Her face weathered and lined, her hair bound in a simple linen coif, emerges from one of the huts. She's wearing a long, shapeless tunic of coarse brown wool. Her hands are red and chapped as she carries a wooden bucket. She stops when she sees you, of wariness and mild curiosity. Awake then, she says, her voice raspy, you can barely comprehend. Best get to the fields. The sun won't wait for lazy bones. You stare at her, reeling. You try to speak, to ask where you are, who she is, but only a strangled croak emerges. She just shakes her head, a faint sigh escaping her lips. "Aye, another slow one," she mutters, turning back to her task. "Becomes your teacher, and the next lesson is communication." With a jolt that your modern English is likely as foreign here as the language she spoke is to you. You try to mimic her gestures, then to the fields. She nods, a flicker of understanding in her tired eyes. "Aye, land needs tending," she says, gesturing with her chin towards the distant fields. "Thomas will have our hides if we're late." Master Thomas, the Lord? You are a serf? Of that realization settles upon you, heavy and suffocating. This isn't a historical reenactment. This is your life now. You look down at your hands again, the rough skin, the ingrained dirt. You can feel the ache in your back. Suggests you've been performing manual labor, even in your sleep. As you follow the woman, learn is Agnes, towards the fields, you observe more details. The huts are clustered together, forming a small village. Paved roads, only muddy tracks worn smooth by countless feet and cartwheels, is filled with the sounds of animal activity. The bleating of sheep, the grunting of pigs, a blacksmith's hammer. You see children, their faces smudged with dirt, playing with simple wooden toys, though is genuine, a fleeting splash of brightness in the otherwise stark landscape. Agnes hands you a rough wooden hoe, its handle smoothed by years of use. The metal head is pitted and worn. It feels surprisingly heavy, balanced awkwardly. "Start with the north strip," she instructs, her voice devoid of emotion. "Don't be dawdling." You look at the strip of land she indicates. It's a long, narrow rectangle, clumps of earth. The task ahead seems insurmountable, a Sisyphine labor that will repeat itself day after day, season after season for the rest of your life, unless you can find a way out. I discovered in archives that in the 12th century, expectancy for a serf was often in the low 30s, and even then, many years were spent in arduous physical labor. Performing this kind of work day in and day out for decades is almost paralyzing. You tentatively grasp the hoe, wood biting into your palms. The first swing is clumsy, the metal head biting into the earth with a dull thud. Effort sends a shockwave up your arms. This is not the romanticized past of knights and castles you might have imagined. The reality of the vast majority of people, relentless, back-breaking work lived out in a world defined by dirt, sweat, present need to survive. The sheer monotony of it all begins to sink in, a crushing realization that your days will be dictated by the needs of the soil and the demands of your lord. For personal ambition or intellectual pursuit, you are a cog in a vast agrarian machine, existence tied to the very earth beneath your feet. The sun, though still low in the sky, is beginning to climb. The cold seeps from the relentless toil. The cold seeps from the ground, a constant reminder of the unyielding nature of this world, already starting in your lower back, a premonition of the hours to come. The sheer tedium of this existence is beginning to dawn on you, a far more terrifying prospect than any imagined danger. You wonder, growing sense of dread, what other mundane, soul-crushing realities await you as you continue to adapt to this life, stepping through time into a world that operated by entirely different rules. The air, familiar blend of exhaust fumes and processed food, is now thick with the earthy scent of damp soil, wood smoke, and something vaguely animal. You stir not to the insistent chirp of an alarm, but to the gradual brightening of a sliver of light that pierces the rough, hewn planks of your dwelling. This isn't a gentle awakening, equal imperative, dictated by the sun's slow ascent over the eastern fields, a celestial clock that governs every waking moment. Wool of your tunic, scratchy against your skin, is the first tangible sensation, a constant reminder of your station. Solden's no memory foam, just the coarse weave designed for durability, not comfort. Almost feel the grit of straw and dried mud clinging to it, a testament to the previous day's labor. The early morning seeps into your bones, a damp cold that the single, small hearth, now banked with embers, truly banish. This is the stark reality of existence in the year of our Lord 1273, in the small hamlet of Oak Haven, within the lands of Lord Reginald de Montfort. The rhythm of life changes as you push yourself from the straw-filled pallet with a dull, pervasive throb, a constant companion born from ceaseless manual labor. There is no leisurely stretching, no mental preparation for the day's intellectual challenges. Your mind, a blank slate in this new reality, focused on the primal needs: survival, sustenance, and service. You glance around your sleeping space. It's a small, the walls of packed earth and wattle and daub offering little insulation. A faint, musky odor, a blend of unwashed bodies, dander from the occasional pig or chicken that might seek refuge indoors during harsh weather, scent of last night's meagre supper, likely a pottage of barley and root vegetables, hangs heavy in the air. Here is the pallet, perhaps a rough wooden stool and a communal storage chest. The floor is simply the packed earth beneath your bare feet. You can feel the tiny pebbles and the occasional bit of straw sticking to your soles. Your hands move with an unthinking efficiency. There's no debate, no personal preference to indulge. You reach for the same rough tunic you wore yesterday, perhaps another identical one if you are fortunate enough to possess two. The drab is the uniform of your class. The tunic is simple, a sack-like garment with a hole for your head and arms. Below it, a rough linen shirt, also unadorned. Your trousers, if you wear them, are likely made of the same coarse wool or linen. There are no buttons, no zippers, no intricate tailoring. Clothing is purely functional, barrier against the elements, and a visual marker of your place in society. The feel of the rough fabric against your skin is a constant. Level irritation, a sensory input that you have learned, or rather are being forced to learn, to ignore. Breakfast is a solitary, a ritual devoid of joy or anticipation. You approach the communal hearth where a woman or mother, the familial bonds are as utilitarian as everything else, is already tending a simmering pot. Today, thin gruel, made from boiled barley or oats, perhaps with a few chopped leeks or onions if the garden has been generous, a portion into a wooden bowl, the surface worn smooth by countless meals. The taste is bland, earthy, and filling, satisfying in a modern sense. There's no sweetening, no spice, no variety. You eat quickly, gruel with a wooden spoon or even your hands, the warmth a welcome sensation against the morning chill. You can hear the soft rustle of straw outside as a neighbor's cow shifts in its tether and the distant, mournful lowing of cattle. The sounds are muted as if filtered through the very earth you inhabit. There is no discussion of the day's plans, no talk of hopes or dreams. The day's work is predetermined by the seasons, the needs of the Lord, and the dictates of the bailiff. You finish your meagre meal, the taste lingering on your tongue, a simple, unadorned flavor of sustenance. Your hands on your tunic, the ingrained dirt and grime a familiar texture. You can feel the rough weave of the fabric, the occasional snag or loose thread, the air in the dwelling is still cool, the smoke from the hearth having cleared somewhat. The general atmosphere is one of earthy dampness. You can almost taste the wood smoke on the back of your throat. Of life changes as you step outside your dwelling into the dawning light. The village of Oakhaven, soft glow of early morning, is a study in muted earth tones. Huts of wattle and daub, darkened by rain and time, cluster around a small, muddy track that serves as the main thoroughfare. The buildings, perhaps the manor houses, storehouses, or the small Oster parish church with its simple wooden bell tower, slightly, but even these are built of the same basic materials, their architecture dictated by necessity and available resources. The air outside is crisp, carrying the scent of dew, laden grass, animal dung, and the ever-present wood smoke. You can hear the crowing of a rooster, the bleating of sheep from a nearby pen, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. That signifies the start of the day's labor for someone else, someone perhaps slightly more fortunate. The stream of other villagers, their faces etched with the same wary resignation, their movements as unhurried as the rising sun. Cheerful greeting, no camaraderie. Each individual is focused on the task ahead, on fulfilling their obligations. You can see the rough, homespun wool of their tunics, the leather pouches at their belts, the simple wooden tools they carry. Beneath your feet is uneven, a mixture of packed earth, mud, and scattered straw. The slight give of the mud with each step. You are on your way to the fields, expanse of land that defines your existence. The land itself is the true master. Reginald Montfort is merely its administrator. Today, like most days, will be spent in the service of that land and its lord. Perhaps it's plowing, the heavy wooden plough pulled by oxen turning over the stubborn soil. Or perhaps it's sowing seeds, your hands scattering them evenly across the furrows. Or maybe it's weeding, your back bent for hours, meticulously pulling the unwanted growth that competes with the precious crops. The sun, now higher in the sky, casts long shadows. You can feel its warmth beginning to press down on your shoulders, a familiar weight. The sounds of the village fade behind you, rustling of wind through the tall grass and the distant calls of birds. I discovered in the archives of the Bodleian Library of manorial records from the late 13th century, average serf in England was bound to the land and required to perform a set number of labour days each week for their lord. Days were unpaid and non-negotiable. For the year 1300, for instance, serf might owe the lord up to 3 days of work per week, in addition to other obligations like tending the lord's gardens. This is an even grinding grain at the lord's mill, for which a portion of the flour was always taken as a fee. Illustrates a fundamental difference from modern employment. Your labor wasn't a choice or a negotiation, but a fundamental condition of your birth. You can feel the rough texture of the soil under your fingernails, the way it clings and stains. The smell of the earth and fertile is everywhere. You can hear the lowing of the oxen as they strain against the yoke, misting in the cool air. The taste of the air is clean, unpolluted, but also carries a faint, wild scent of untamed nature. If you were to have one, would be a simple, repetitive stream of instructions from your body: lift, pull, stoop. There's no room for complex thought, for abstract contemplation. Your mind is as focused as your hands, honed to the immediate. The rhythm of life changes as you encounter your neighbor, Thomas, a man whose face is as weathered and lined as your own. He's already at the edge of the field, his movements slow and deliberate. "Good morning, Thomas." You might grunt, the greeting as perfunctory as the sunrise, his eyes not meeting yours directly. The Lord's bailiff, Master Giles, meadow today, says the hay needs cutting before the rain. His voice is a low rumble, being dragged across the earth. You can feel the slight tremor in his hands as he adjusts the worn leather strap of his scythe. The smell of sweat, mingled with the sweet scent of cut grass from a previous harvest, emanates from him. You nod in understanding. Master Giles, a man whose authority, though minor in the grand scheme of things, is absolute within Oak Haven, enforcer of Lord Reginald's will. He's a man who enjoys his position, and his voice, when he speaks, carries a sharp. You can almost hear his voice in your mind, a reprimand for any perceived laziness. The taste of apprehension can sometimes surface when the bailiff is near. You can feel the smooth, worn handle of your own scythe passed down through generations. The weight of it is familiar, a heavy, dependable extension of your own arm. Higher it's raised, now direct and warm, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. You can feel the heat on your exposed skin, the sweat beginning to bead on your forehead and trickle down your back. Sounds of the field are now a symphony of natural activity, the buzz of insects, the chirping of unseen birds in the hedgerows, rhythmic swish of scythers as the work begins in earnest. The taste of the air is now tinged with the dry dust kicked up by your movements, and the faint, sweet scent of crushed clover is the beginning of a day much like any other, a day defined by the relentless cycle of labor, the needs of others, and the unforgiving rhythms of the natural world. There is no choice, no deviation, only the steady time marked by the sun's journey across the sky and the ever-present demands of survival. As you swing your scythe, the satisfying bite of the blade into the tough stems of grass, notice the stark contrast to the effortless ease of modern life. Here, expended is a direct investment in survival, reminder of the preciousness of life and the immense privilege of choice that modern society, for all its complexities, affords, is both humbling and profoundly isolating, a glimpse into a world where the daily grind was not a metaphor, fabric of existence, and as the sun begins its slow descent, promising another identical day tomorrow, quiet dread of this unending repetition settling deep within your bones. In an era where your biggest worry wasn't Wi-Fi connectivity, but the gnawing uncertainty of the next harvest. Part 4 of our journey into the life of a medieval serf will now immerse you in the heart of the settlement, fabric of your new, undeniably mundane existence. You've moved beyond the immediate, personal shock of your new reality, contrast to your former life, the rough-spun tunic against your skin, the lingering taste of yesterday's watery gruel. These are now familiar sensations, first tentative steps into a world that operates at a pace dictated by the sun and the seasons, where the extraordinary is found not in grand pronouncements, during resilience of the human spirit against the backdrop of relentless sameness. The months teach you that your world's perceived limitations is a tightly woven tapestry of communal existence. Your dwelling, simple wattle and daub hut with a thatched roof, is indistinguishable from its neighbours, a cluster of these humble structures forming the core of the settlement. The air inside is thick with the scent of wood smoke, hanging from the rafters, and the ever-present earthy aroma of damp soil that permeates everything. Sunlight manages to pierce the gloom through the single, unglazed opening, illuminates motes of dust dancing in the still air. The floor is packed earth, cool and uneven beneath your bare feet. A straw-filled pallet serves as your bed, texture a constant reminder of your station. There are no furnishings to speak of, save for perhaps a crude wooden stool or a woven basket for storing meagre possessions. Your neighbors, as you've come to know them, a constant presence, their lives intertwined with yours through shared labor and mutual dependence. Recognize the creak of the millstone as it begins its grinding work at dawn, the lowing of cattle being herded to pasture, rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer. These are the ambient sounds of your existence, devoid of the cacophony of modern cities. The communal spaces are as vital as the individual huts. At the center of the village, usually near a well or a stream, is the open area where much of life unfolds. Here, wash clothes in the frigid water, their voices a low murmur of gossip and shared labor. Children, smudged with dirt, chase each other with sticks, their laughter a fleeting counterpoint to the prevailing seriousness. Village church, a modest stone structure, its bell a solemn marker of time and faith. And, of course, the manor house, and more imposing than any other building, a constant, tangible symbol of the Lord's authority. Your social structure is rigidly defined. At the apex sits the Lord of the Manor, distant figure whose presence is felt through his bailiff and reeve. Below them are the free tenants who hold land in return for services. The unfree serfs, your obligations are manifold and non-negotiable. You owe labor service on the Lord's demesne, as feels tending his livestock and performing any tasks he requires. You also owe rents, a portion of your harvest, a few chickens, or a measure of honey. This is not a life of choice, it is a life of duty, of toil dictated by the needs of the manor and the will of the Lord. Teach you that even within this seemingly uniform existence, there are subtle hierarchies and relationships. You've encountered Old Man Hemlock, his hands gnarled like ancient roots, who always has a story to tell, albeit often a grim one. The harshness of winter, or the capriciousness of the weather. He once grumbled to you, "See that patch of land, lad? My father worked it, and his father before him. Never seen a good yield from it, not in my lifetime. Still, it's ours to work, to claim." This exchange, seemingly insignificant, underscored the generational nature of your servitude. You've also had brief, often brusque interactions with Agnes, the miller's wife, a sturdy woman with flour perpetually dusted on her apron. You recall one particularly damp morning, needing a small sack of oats. You'd called out, your voice hesitant. She'd turned, wiping her hands on her apron. What is it then? The Lord's grain ain't for free, you know. You'd managed to exchange a few precious eggs for the oats, vital, both vital and fraught with the unspoken understanding of your subservient position. In archives that the average medieval serf's diet was remarkably limited, primarily consisting of bread, a thick stew of grains and vegetables, and perhaps some cheese or eggs. Meat was a rarity, reserved for feast days or when the Lord granted permission for communal hunting. This scarcity is palpable in your own experience. Constant low-level hum of hunger a familiar companion. Your clothing, too, is functional and drab, typically made of coarse wool, belted at the waist, and rough woolen breeches. In colder months, you might add a cloak, also of wool, shoes or straw, soled sandals. The colors are muted browns, greys, and undyed wool. There is no fashion, no adornment. The months teach you that your world, though lacking the conveniences you once knew, possesses a certain stark beauty. The rolling hills, the dense forests teeming with life, of the night sky unmarred by artificial light, these are all part of your sensory landscape. To appreciate the warmth of the sun on your face after a long day's work, the taste of fresh water from the well, clean straw beneath your head. It's a life stripped down to its essentials, existence where survival is the primary objective. Yet, amidst this starkness, you find moments of quiet connection. The shared meal, however meagre, with your fellow serfs, the communal singing of simple hymns in the church, nod of recognition from a passing neighbor. These are the threads that bind you to your community, that make life bearable. As the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the fields, another night, the sounds of the village begin to quieten, the day's labor drawing to a close. You feel the familiar ache in your muscles, the weariness that settles deep into your bones. Tomorrow will bring much of the same cycle of toil and sustenance. Yet as you lie down on your straw pallet, the scent of wood smoke still in the air, you can't help but wonder about the lives of others, perhaps even those in distant lands, are filled with different kinds of worries, different kinds of joys. This vast difference in human experience, current reality to the lives you once knew, is a profound and humbling realization. Teach you that even the most mundane existence has its own subtle rhythms, its own quiet lessons, and as the darkness deepens, you find yourself already anticipating the slow, deliberate unfolding of the next day, a day much like this one and the one before it that will surely follow. So I've studied paint a picture that's both more mundane and more extraordinary than many realize when they first step back into the early medieval period. The jarring displacement, the rough-spun tunic against your skin, the unfamiliar chill of a wattle and daub hut navigated the basic rhythms of the village, the shared space, the communal well, the distant tolling of the church bell. Now, deeper into the very foundation of this existence, the invisible chains that bind you to this land, to this lord, to this life of serfdom, the economic and political reality that shapes every sunrise and sunset. The passage of time reveals the intricate web of obligation that defines your new reality. You are not simply living on the land, you are the land. This manor, this sprawling expanse of fields, woodlands, and pastures is not yours to own. Is it even truly the Lord's to dispose of as he pleases without consequence? It is held in trust, inheritance passed down through generations, each generation owing service and loyalty to a higher authority, ultimately the king. Tangible reality is the local lord, Baron Reginald de Montaigne, whose presence is felt even when he is miles away at his stone castle, a stark contrast to the humble dwellings of the village. From this moment forward, is inextricably tied to the Lord's demesne. This isn't a matter of choice, but of birthright, burden. You are a serf, a service, bound to the soil. You cannot leave the manor without the Lord's express permission. Think of it like this: your identity is not solely your own, defined by your status as a member of this particular manor under the jurisdiction of Baron Reginald. Of freedom extends to the most fundamental aspects of your life. You can't marry someone from another manor without the Lord's consent, lest valuable labor be taken from his lands. You can't even grind your grain at a mill other than his, or bake your bread in an oven not belonging to him. These are not mere inconveniences, they are fundamental restrictions on your autonomy, woven into the fabric of daily life. The economic exchange, the bedrock of this feudal arrangement. You are granted a strip of land, perhaps an acre or two, your own sustenance. You work this land with your own hands, coaxing wheat, barley, and peas from the soil. Small vegetable patch, perhaps growing onions and beans. A few chickens scratching in the dirt for stray seeds and insects. This is your subsistence. and your family alive. But this land is not truly yours. You do not own it in the modern sense. You are a tenant whose tenancy is perpetual and tied to your labor. The passage of time reveals the true cost of this grant. Working your own small plot, you owe the Lord a significant portion of your labor and your produce. This is the system of corvée, the unpaid labor that forms the backbone of the Lord's economy. On specific days of the week, by the Lord's reeve, you will leave your own fields and work the Lord's demesne. You will plough his vast fields, sow his seed, crops, and come harvest time, you will be there, sweating under the sun, his bounty before you can even begin to harvest your own. Imagine the exhaustion, the sheer physical toll of this double duty. Sustenance depends on your labor, but a significant chunk of that labor is dedicated to enriching your Lord. In the archives of St. Albans Abbey, a document from around 1080 detailing the obligations of serfs on their lands, specific days for ploughing, for reaping, for threshing, and even for gathering firewood from the Lord's woods. Volume of required labor was staggering. For example, might be obligated to work the Lord's fields for 3 days a week during peak seasons, in addition to any boon, works extra, the Lord might demand. This was on top of tending his own small plot, caring for his family, maintaining his meager dwelling. Let's imagine a conversation you might have with your neighbor, a man named Thomas, whose weathered face bears the indelible marks of years spent under the open sky. You're both resting for a moment, your crude wooden spades after a long morning of clearing stones from the Lord's south field, thick with the smell of turned earth and the distant, earthy aroma of livestock. Another week, Thomas grunts, wiping sweat from his brow with a calloused hand. His tunic, like yours, is patched and faded. Wood smoke and damp wool. Seems Baron Reginald's harvest is always more important than our own bellies. You nod, the weariness settling deep into your bones. I, Thomas, if only the Lord's hunger could be sated with his own fields, the best of our strength, leaving us with the dregs. You remember the small sack of barley you managed to set aside. A few more weeks. The thought of it, your meager savings, makes your stomach clench with a familiar anxiety. Spits on the ground. He sent his reeve, Master Hugh, to inspect our plots yesterday. Said my turnips were looking thin. Threatened to take a portion of my meager yield if they don't improve. If I have magic to make them grow without enough sun or rain. His voice is low, a rumble of frustration, but he keeps it carefully modulated, aware that eavesdroppers are a constant threat. The Lord's justice, administered by his appointed reeve, is swift and often harsh. You look at your own small strip of land, the one you've been nurturing with such care. You see the promise of a few loaves of bread, the sustenance for your family. See the ever-present shadow of Baron Reginald's demands, the looming spectre of unpaid labor and confiscated produce. Concept of ownership, of possessing something truly your own, is a distant, almost mythical notion. Your labor, your time, very existence is a commodity traded for the right to exist on this land. The passage of time reveals the psychological weight of this constant obligation, weariness that goes beyond mere physical fatigue. It's a soul-deep exhaustion, the lack of upward mobility, any real hope for improvement beyond the barest survival can be crushing. A free laborer who might seek better wages, or a skilled artisan who can ply their trade in different towns, largely predetermined. You are a serf, and unless some extraordinary event intervenes, you will die a serf and Fifon his father before him. This is the fundamental reality of your existence under feudalism. You are a cog in a vast, agrarian machine, your life dictated by the seasons, the will of your lord, and the ingrained customs of the era. The land provides, claims, demanding a heavy price for its bounty. This is the foundation of your new life, yielding bedrock upon which all other experiences will be built. Tomorrow, explore the specific duties and restrictions that further define this life, from the grinding of grain to the payment of taxes. Close your eyes and transport yourself to a time when life moved at a completely different rhythm, dictated not by ticking clocks or buzzing notifications, but by the ancient, unwavering pulse of the sun and the soil. In the frantic rush of the 21st century, you are a serf bound to the land in the year of our Lord 1348, in a small, nestled in the shadow of a modest manor house in the English countryside. Forget your carefully curated playlists. Only soundtrack to your existence is the whisper of the wind through the thatch, the bleating of sheep, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer, and the ever-present murmur of human toil. This is a life stripped bare of the ephemeral, a life grounded in the tangible, the cyclical, and above all, the profoundly monotonous. The concept of variety is an alien one, reserved for those who reside within the stone walls of the castle, not those who till the stubborn earth with calloused hands. Your months, your very life, are a testament to the unyielding power of the seasons, a grand of planting, tending and harvesting with no applause and very little change. As days blur into weeks, internalize the unwritten calendar of the agricultural year, a relentless cycle that governs every waking moment, not with a burst of vibrant color and playful breezes, but with the heavy clinging to your worn leather boots like a second skin. The air still carrying the bite of winter, with the scent of damp soil and the faint, sweet promise of new growth. Your hands already rough and cracked. It's cold, yielding mud. The primary task is plowing. You will guide the heavy wooden plow, biting deep into the earth, pulled by oxen whose breath steams in the cool air. The furrows you create are straight, so straight, a testament to the uneven terrain and the strain in your shoulders. The smell of manure, both fresh and old, a constant reminder of the life-giving, yet pungent, force that fuels the land. You work alongside your fellow villagers, echo of the one before. There's Thomas, his face perpetually etched with a weary stoicism, and Agnes, surprisingly swift despite the burden of her years. Another turn, John. Thomas grunts, his voice low and gravelly. This the oxen's yoke. This field seems to stretch on forever. Agnes, bending to pick up a stray stone, was a wry smile. Forever is a long time, Thomas, but the barley needs to go in. Our complaints. You nod, the familiar ache in your back a silent agreement. As days blur into weeks, commences, you sow the seeds, the precious grains that represent your very survival. Wheat, barley, each cast with a practiced flick of the wrist, a hopeful prayer whispered into the still, damp earth. Seeds is rough against your fingertips, a stark contrast to the smooth, cool feel of the soil. The process is painstaking, deliberate act of faith. The sun, when it finally breaks through the clouds, is a welcome but often fleeting warmth. You squint against its glare, the sweat trickling down your brow, mixing with the fine dust that coats your skin. The sounds are of rustling cloth, the soft thud of seeds hitting the ground, and the low hum of conversation, mostly practical, about the weather, the yield, or the latest pronouncement from the manor. You might share a meager midday meal, a hunk of coarse bread Some pottage made from boiled grains and whatever vegetables are available. Down with weak owl sitting on the edge of the field, the scent of turned earth mingling with the simple, hearty aroma of your food. Patient of a varied menu, no discussion of culinary trends. Survival is the only recipe. I discovered in archives that the average serf consumed around 2,000 calories a day, contrast to the overconsumption many experience today, though the nutritional quality was often lacking. As days blur into weeks, becomes the dominant rhythm. Weeding is a back-breaking, soul-crushing task. You spend hours bent double and sore, pulling out the persistent invaders that threaten to choke the life from your precious grains. Crushed weeds, sharp and sometimes acrid, fills the air. The sun beats down relentlessly in the summer months, fields into a shimmering expanse of heat. Thirst is a constant companion. The water from the village well, carried in heavy wooden buckets, tasting faintly of earth and algae. You might exchange a few words with Eleanor, a woman whose resilience you've always admired. My backache is something fierce today. Eleanor, you might say, straightening up with a groan. These thistles have a will of their own. Eleanor, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. John, but so do we. If we let them win, what will we eat come winter? Her words, simple and direct, with profound true truth. The threat of famine is never far from anyone's mind. This constant battle against nature, the elements against the very weeds that sprout from the ground, is the essence of your existence. It's a life lived on the edge, where a poor harvest could mean starvation. This focus on survival, on the immediate needs of the body, from the abstract anxieties that plague modern life, like job security in a globalized economy, as days blur into weeks. Of all this toil arrives with the harvest. The air is filled with the dry rustle of ripe grain, a sound that is both a relief and a grim reminder of the work yet to be done. Scythes swing in a rhythmic, deadly dance, slicing through the stalks. The smell of cut grain is sweet and earthy, a heady perfume of accomplishment. Dawn until dusk, your muscles screaming, your hands blistered and bleeding. The sheaves are gathered, bound and stacked, golden monuments to your labor. The Lord's portion is always the first to be gathered, a palpable reminder of your obligations. As the reeve, a man appointed by the Lord to oversee the peasants, directs the collection of the Lord's share, his voice sharp and demanding. There's a quiet resentment, a shared understanding among the villagers, but open defiance is unthinkable. The harvest is a communal effort, a desperate race against the encroaching autumn and the potential for rain to spoil the precious yield. The communal threshing floor, a large, flat area where the grain is beaten to separate the kernels from the chaff, becomes a hub of activity. The rhythmic pounding of flails, the dry hiss of the grain, the shouts of encouragement, and the occasional curse, it's a symphony of survival. As days blur into weeks, the cycle begins anew, subtle variations dictated by the specific needs of the season. Of harvest might involve gleaning, gathering the few remaining ears of grain that were missed, a task often left to the poorest or the children. Comes the preparation for winter. The fields are left fallow, resting, but your work doesn't cease, involved in repairing tools, mending fences, or gathering firewood. The scent of wood smoke becomes a dominant aroma as families prepare for the colder months. The days shorten, fading earlier each afternoon, and the chill in the air deepens. You huddle in your simple wattle and daub hut, smoke from the central hearth stinging your eyes, the rough wool of your tunic scratching against your skin, and livestock, which are often kept close for warmth, permeates everything. The food becomes even more basic: pottage dried peas and perhaps some salted meat if you were fortunate. The conversations are subdued, focused on the immediate, for a mild winter and a successful spring to come. There is no grand narrative of progress, no anticipation of advancement. The enduring, the repetitive, the fundamental rhythm of life and death, of sowing and reaping. The next season begins its familiar, unchanging turn. This unwavering sameness, deviation from the established pattern, is the very core of your existence, the most profoundly boring, yet undeniably essential devil serf. And so, as the chill of winter begins to settle, you find yourself contemplating the coming spring. The promise of the same tasks, the same struggles, the same unyielding rhythm that has defined your life thus far. Anticipation is not for something new, but for the return of the familiar, the predictable, ingrained patterns that govern every aspect of your world. But what happens when this predictable rhythm is disrupted? When a force beyond your comprehension enters your life, shattering the accustomed order? This is a question that will begin to unfold as we explore the next layer of your existence. The scent of wood, smoke drifts through your consciousness as we begin this journey, a comforting aroma that signals the start of another day in your new reality. You stir on your straw-filled pallet, weave of the coarse woolen blanket scratching against your cheek. The air inside your small and daub hut is thick with the lingering smell of last night's meager stew, a pungent mix of leeks, barley, sliver of salted pork if you were fortunate. Outside, the pre-dawn chill bites a damp, earthy cold that seeps through the gaps in the walls. You can hear the lowing of oxen in the communal byre, rustle of straw as someone else wakes, and the distant, mournful bark of a dog. Gradually, you realize the familiar, crushing weight of your obligations settling upon you. Today, like most days during the planting season, is dedicated to the fields. A heavy, wooden beast awaits. Your hands, calloused and cracked, ache with a dull throb even before the day's labor begins. A rough-spun affair of undyed wool, its texture an ever-present reminder of the earth you work. Breeches are stiff and smell faintly of animal hide and sweat. You forego any elaborate grooming. Splash of icy water from the communal bucket is all you can manage. The shock of it sending a shiver down your spine. The village, a cluster of humble dwellings huddled around the imposing stone church, begins to stir. Smoke curls from a dozen chimneys. Grey streaks against the pale, emerging sky. The ground underfoot is a mixture of mud and churned earth, slick with dew. Join the slow, shuffling procession of villagers making their way towards the Lord's demesne. Faces with the same weary resignation you feel. The air is alive with the murmur of hushed conversations, wooden tools being gathered, and the rhythmic creak of the oxen harnessed to the ploughs. Your first task is to break the soil. Guided by your strong, if unwilling hands, bites into the damp earth. It's heavy work, a constant, back-bending strain. Made of iron, churns up clods of soil, exposing the dark, rich loam beneath. The oxen, strong and placid, pull with steady power, misting in the cool air. You walk behind, your feet sinking slightly with each step, your muscles screaming in protest. The repetitive motion, the endless turning of the earth, is hypnotic, a dull rhythm that threatens to lull your mind into a stupor. On the immediate, the feel of the plough handles, the scent of turned soil, the low grunts of the oxen. Gradually, that the initial ploughing is only the beginning. Once the fields are turned, the harrowing begins. A heavier, toothed implement is dragged across the ploughed land, breaking up the larger clods and smoothing the surface in preparation for sowing. is arduous, requiring constant vigilance to keep the harrow from snagging. The fine dust kicked up by the harrow settles on your skin, in your hair, and in your lungs, a constant, gritty reminder of the earth's embrace. Then comes the sowing. You walk the furrows, your hand dipping into a sack of seeds, barley or rye, depending on the Lord's decree. You cast the seeds with a practiced, sweeping motion, aiming for an even distribution. Balance. Too few seeds and the yield will be poor. Too many and they'll compete for nutrients. The sun climbs higher in the sky, beating down on your unprotected head. Your thirst becomes a gnawing ache. Is a precious commodity, rationed carefully. Later in the day, you might be tasked with weeding, armed with a small, sharp hoe, through the growing rows, carefully extracting the unwanted plants that threaten to choke your precious crops. An intricate task, requiring a finer touch, but no less demanding. The sun, now at its zenith, bakes the earth, shimmers with heat. You can see the sweat glistening on the backs of your fellow serfs as they work alongside you. Eleanor, a woman whose weathered face speaks of years spent under the same sun, works a few furrows over. You catch her eye, and she offers a brief, wary nod. Later, during a short respite, you approach her. The barley looks strong this year, Eleanor. You say, raspy from the dust. She wipes her brow with the back of her hand. If the rains are kind and the crows are few. Thomas says he saw a fox near the western edge yesterday. Worries me about the chickens. You nod. The Lord's men were collecting the tithe yesterday. Took the fattest hen from my coop. Eleanor lets out a short, humorless laugh. We give them our sweat, our backs, and they demand more. Remember when the Lord's son broke his leg hunting? It was the curse of the land, and made us pray for a week straight, as if could mend his pampered bones. You share a grim smile. I heard the reeve complaining about the quality of the owl at the market in Bumpton last week. Said it wasn't strong enough for his liking. He'd do well to spend a day in these fields. He'd understand what real labor is. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the fields, ache with a profound weariness. The smell of damp earth is now mixed with the faint, sweet scent of blooming wildflowers, a fleeting beauty in this relentless cycle. You gather your tools, your movements stiff and labored, has been a testament to endurance, a monotonous march through the hours, punctuated only by the primal needs of sustenance and rest. You realize that this is the rhythm of your life, dictated by the seasons and the demands of the Lord. There is no grand ambition, no soaring hope, only the persistent, grinding reality of survival. As you trudge back towards the village, scent of wood smoke again fills the air, a signal not of an ending, but of a brief pause before the cycle begins anew. Passion seeps into your very bones, a deep, pervasive fatigue that sleep can only temporarily alleviate. Tomorrow, wait again. The next stage of this existence will delve into the subtle, yet crucial, nuances of tending these crops. Vigilance required against the myriad threats that could undo all your hard-won labor. Historian has that one period that captures their imagination completely. This is mine. It's not the grand pronouncements of kings or the clash of armies that fascinate me, but the quiet, persistent hum of daily life, relentless cycle that governed the existence of the vast majority. We've journeyed through the planting, the tending, growth under a watchful sky. Now, as the sun begins its steeper descent and the days shorten, a new urgency grips the land. The air, the hopeful chirping of birds, now carries the dry rustle of ripening grain, a sound that is both a promise and a threat. This is the season of harvest, the culmination of a year's labor, and for you, the serf, it is a period of intense, back-breaking work endurance against the ticking clock of autumn's arrival. The scythe, a familiar, large curve of polished steel, feels heavy in your calloused hands. It's not a tool of delicate precision, instrument designed to fell swaths of wheat, barley, or rye with each sweeping arc. The air is thick with the sweet grain mingling with the sharper tang of sweat and the ever-present aroma of damp sole. Your tunic, a coarse weave of undyed wool, clings uncomfortably to your skin, perpetually damp from exertion. The rough-spun breeches chafe your thighs, and the straw that has inevitably found its way inside them prickles incessantly. Your bare feet, walking on rough earth and stubble, are surprisingly sensitive to the sharp edges of fallen stalks. Your muscles scream. The scythe demands a deep bend from the knees, a powerful twist of the torso, and a full body extension. Is demanding bend, swing, straighten, gather. Bend, swing, straighten, gather. It's a dance of exhaustion. Thousands of times the sun, a relentless eye in the sky, beats down on your exposed neck and the crown of your head, where a simple linen coif offers scant protection. You can feel the sweat trickling down your temples, stinging your eyes, salt crusting on your skin. Your throat is parched, and the meager ration of water from the communal skin passed around infrequently. Fleeting relief. Your fellow reapers work alongside you, a silent, grim procession of bent backs and rhythmic swings. Thomas, face permanently etched with weariness, is a few paces to your left. You can hear his laboured breaths, the occasional grunt of effort. Eleanor, her hair a tangled mess of straw and sweat, works with a fierce determination, economical and powerful. There are no idle conversations, no jokes to lighten the mood. The pressure to complete the harvest before the inevitable rains arrive is palpable. A failed harvest means hunger for the entire winter, larger with every passing day. One afternoon, as you pause for a moment to wipe your brow with the back of your forearm, a stout man named John rides past on his sturdy pony, his voice amplified by the open fields, a hum of labour. "Faster, you lot! The Lord wants his share," and the sky looks angry. "No lingering today." His words are a stark reminder of the stakes. You are not merely harvesting for yourself. Significant portion of the yield belongs to the Lord of the manor, collected as rent and tithers. This is the fundamental truth of your existence. Your labour, your crops, are ultimately not your own. Discovered in the manorial records of a small estate in Suffolk, dated around 1380, share could often be as much as a third of the crop, sometimes more, depending on the specific feudal agreement. Your perspective shifts when you consider the sheer scale of the operation. Entire fields, stretching as far as the eye can see, be cleared. The grain, once cut, must be gathered into sheaves, tied with straw, painstakingly transported to the threshing floor. This is a task often undertaken by women and older children, their smaller frames better suited to carrying the bundles. The air is filled with the dry, whispering sound of straw as it's twisted and tied, a counterpoint to the rhythmic swish of the scythers. Later, dips towards the horizon, casting long shadow showers across the stubble-laden fields. You gather with the others for a brief respite. Is simple a thick, dark bread, often made with a mix of wheat and rye, two of vegetables, perhaps turnips or leeks, if the garden has been generous. The taste is bland, much needed sustenance. Eleanor, her face smudged with dirt, sits beside you, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Another day done," she murmurs, her voice raspy. "But there's still so much to do, isn't there?" You nod, offer words of comfort. You remember a conversation you overheard between Thomas and the village elder, old William. Days prior, Thomas had been complaining about the back-breaking labor, wishing for an easier life. William lived outdoors, had simply shaken his head. Easier, this is the life we have, lad. We work, we eat, we pray. The weather is kind. His words, though resigned, held a certain truth. This cyclical existence, though arduous, predictable, it was a stark contrast to the unpredictable anxieties of modern life, where the pressures can be more abstract but no less draining. The smell of wood smoke, now a welcome scent, drifts from the village as the last rays of sunlight fade. You can see the faint glow of fires through the small openings in the wattle and daub houses. The day's labor is over. Exhaustion lingers, a heavy blanket over your bones. As you walk back towards your small dwelling, the stubble crunches under your feet. The moon, a sliver of silver in the darkening sky, offers a cool, distant light. Your hands and blistered ache with a deep, persistent throb. You know that tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, sheaf is gathered. But even as your body protests, a small part of your mind, the historian's mind, observes, records. This relentless cycle of labor, this dependence on the land and the weather, shaped every aspect of medieval life. Harvest nears completion. A new set of obligations begins to take shape. The meticulous task of storing, measuring, the Lord's due, a prelude to the long, lean months of winter. This, you realize, is the true rhythm of this existence that continues unbroken through the ages. You've seen the movies, read the books. Reality was something else entirely. The rustle of the golden wheat, so visually appealing from afar, aching muscles and calloused hands. The harvest, a period of intense, back-breaking labor, is behind you, is far from over. It's late August, around the year 1250, in the fictional village of Oakhaven, somewhere in the rolling green hills of England. The sun, still a benevolent presence in the sky, shadows as you stand amidst the newly cut sheaves. The air, still carrying the faint, sweet scent of dry grass, with the dust of the field. This is the season of threshing and storing, the culmination of months of toil, immediate prelude to the Lord's demands. With each passing moment, existence as a serf under the feudal system becomes more starkly defined. The grain you've painstakingly grown and harvested is not entirely yours. A significant portion, often half or more, is owed to the Lord of the manor, core of your agrarian life. Produce the food and then surrender the majority of it. You're standing in the threshing yard, open space near the manor house, where the real work of separating the precious grain from the worthless chaff begins. The sheaves, twine made from straw, are laid out in neat rows. Your task, along with Eleanor and Thomas and the other villagers, the stalks. The primary tool for this is the flail. Imagine 2 sticks, about 3 feet long, leather or rope. One stick, the handle, you grip firmly. The other, the swipple, is the striking part. You swing the flail in a rhythmic, circular motion. Swipple down onto the sheaves of wheat spread on the hard, part earth or a specially constructed threshing floor. Is designed to shatter the seed heads, releasing the kernels of grain. It's a repetitive, physically demanding process. Swinging, the impact, the rising dust, it all combines to create an environment of sheer, unremitting labor, filled with the dry, papery sound of the swipple hitting straw, a sound that will echo in your ears for days. Eleanor, face streaked with sweat and dust, works with a practiced efficiency beside you. Her movements are fluid, honed by years of repetition. Fingers child, she murmurs, her voice raspy from the dust. Moments inattention and the swipple will find them. You nod, your own hands already sore. raw where the rough leather of the flail handle has rubbed. Thomas, a younger man with a strong back, works with a more vigorous, almost aggressive rhythm. He's trying to impress the reeve, the Lord's overseer, who watches from a distance with a critical eye. A burly man named Giles, dressed in slightly better quality woolens, makes his rounds, a constant reminder of who truly owns this land and its produce. The grain, once threshed, is then winnowed. Crucial step, and one that requires a bit of wind. Eleanor take broad wooden shovels and scoop the mixture of grain and chaff into the air. Chaff is blown away by the breeze, while the heavier grain falls back down. On a calm day, this is a slow and tedious process. On a raised platform, or simply hold your shovel high, letting the wind do its work. The sight of the golden grain cascading down, a small reward for your immense efforts, is momentarily satisfying. But the wind can be fickle. It's too strong, it can blow away good grain. If it's too weak, the winnowing takes an eternity. You remember reading in a charter from the nearby Abbey of St. Albans, dated 1180, of grain was always set aside for the Lord's stores, regardless of the harvest's success. Starkly illustrates the unyielding nature of feudal obligations. The freshly threshed and winnowed grain is then collected, sacks made of rough linen or animal hides. These sacks are then transported to the Lord's granary, a secure stone building within the manor walls, as Thomas and a few other men heave the heavy sacks onto a cart pulled by a sturdy ox. The sheer volume of grain destined for the Lord's larder is staggering. It represents not just your labor, but the sustenance of your family and the entire village for the coming winter. Yet, you receive only a small portion, enough to survive spring, and to continue this cycle of labor and surrender is a constant hum of weariness and quiet resignation. Is this it? Is this all there is? Farm, harvest, thresh, surrender, repeat. You remember a conversation with your father before he passed about a time when his grandfather spoke of a more equitable division of labor, but those were distant whispers, tales of a different era, even exaggerated. The reality is the present, the aching in your back, the dryness in your throat from the dust, gnawing hunger that even the modest portion of grain you'll eventually receive can only partially assuage, in comparison in the way large corporations can absorb the profits from the labor of many, leaving the individual worker with just enough to get by. It's a different scale, a different context. Lying principle of wealth accumulation at the expense of the laborer feels eerily familiar. Environment of the threshing yard is utilitarian and harsh. The ground is packed earth, uneven and dusty. Wooden sheds of straw and animal dung line the edges of the yard. The manor house itself looms, a solid, imposing structure of stone, symbol of power and control that feels distant and untouchable. The sounds are dominated by the rhythmic thud of the flails, the creak of the cartwheels, and the occasional shout from Giles, the reeve. The smells are earthy, dry straw, sweat, animal waste, sweet aroma of the grain itself. The texture of the straw is rough and brittle under your fingers, contrast to the smooth, cool kernels of wheat. You recall a particular research moment, manorial court rolls from the 13th century. These documents, painstakingly written on parchment, detailed disputes over land and labor obligations. One entry from 1265 concerning the manor of Barton, a serf being fined for failing to deliver the full quota of grain to the Lord's granary. Chilling reminder of the consequences of falling short of the absolute authority the Lord wielded. The sheer volume of records, accounting of every bushel, every day of labor, spoke volumes about the system. Sun begins its slow descent towards the horizon, casting a warm, golden light over the scene. A sense of profound weariness settles upon you. The day's work is nearing its end, but the task of storing the grain safely, protected from rodents and moisture, will continue for days. The sheer effort involved in this process, from field to granary, underscores the fragility of medieval life. A bad harvest, a harsh winter, a lord's increased demands. Any of these could spell disaster. Passing moment, the shadows lengthen and the chill in the air begins to bite. The day's labor is done, but the grain, blood of your existence, is now secured in the Lord's granary. Taste the meager portion that will eventually find its way to your family's table. A stark reminder of the immense effort that produced it, of resting your aching limbs, is tempered by the knowledge that tomorrow and the day after will bring more work, and the relentless continuation of this monotonous cycle. The immediate aftermath of the harvest process of threshing and storing has firmly established the immediate claims upon your labor and its fruits. The stage for what comes next, the obligations that extend far beyond the fields themselves. Sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to truly experience life in this distant time. Not the romanticized version, but the stark, unvarnished truth. You wake up to the same rough wool scratching your cheek, the same chill seeping through the thin walls of your wattle and daub dwelling. The air, the lingering scent of last night's meager stew, mostly root vegetables, and a whisper of salted pork does little to dispel the gnawing emptiness in your belly. Outside, the eastern sky is just beginning to lighten, painting the thatched roofs and the sturdy, if unadorned, stone church spire a pale, bruised purple. The crowing of a distant rooster, a familiar, insistent sound, is your only alarm clock. Day by day, the cycle of labor is not the only force dictating your existence. There are other demands, more insidious, more draining. At the already scarce bounty you manage to wrest from the soil. Today, the chill wind carries not just the promise of a damp, but the heavy weight of expectation. It's the week of the Lord's demands. Abstract concept of feudal obligation bleeds into the tangible reality of your survival. You pull on your tunic, a coarse garment dyed a dull brown with walnut husks. Texture is a constant reminder of the labor that went into its creation, the spinning of wool by Eleanor and the other women, the weaving. It's a far cry from the soft, vibrant fabrics you've seen in illuminated manuscripts, mere glimpses of a world of luxury utterly alien to your own. Your rough leather shoes, stitched with thick sinew, and cold against your bare feet. Stepping outside, the damp earth clings to your soles. The village of Oakhaven, the gently flowing river Arsh, is stirring. Smoke curls from chimneys, a thin, grey plume against the pale sky. The sounds are muted, the lowing of cattle, the bleating of sheep, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Pay his dues. The church bell, a deep, resonant toll, signals the start of the day's prayers. You head instinctively, a reflex ingrained from birth, a silent acknowledgement of a higher power that seems, at times, as distant as the stars. Your first task, before even considering your own meagre plot, is to report to the manor house. Lord Fitzwilliam, lineage stretches back centuries, whose very presence commands deference, has his own claims on your time and effort. Today, tithe, not just a tenth of your grain, which you've already diligently set aside after the harvest, portion of everything, your chickens, your eggs, even a share of the milk from your single scrawny cow. Thomas, your neighbour, etched with the same wary resignation you feel, walks beside you. His shoulders are stooped, not just from years of manual labour, but from the constant burden of these obligations. Another year, another taking, he mutters, his voice barely audible above the wind, demands more from the Lord, so the Lord demands more from us. You nod. This is the perpetual cycle. Region means higher taxes for the Lord to compensate for his own losses, and those higher taxes trickle down. Inevitably, a war fought by the king means the Lord must provide more men and supplies. Cost is recouped from the labour and produce of his serfs. At the manor, the air is noticeably warmer, stone walls thick and insulating. The great hall, though sparsely furnished by modern standards, opulent compared to your humble dwelling. A fire crackles in a massive hearth. Shadows on the tapestries depicting hunts and battles, scenes of a life you can only imagine. The steward, Aid Master Giles, with a quill tucked behind his ear and parchment spread before him, greets you with a curt nod. Thomas, son of John, he calls out, his voice booming, your tithe for the Michaelmas feast. The Lord requires 3 fat hens and a bushel of your best apples. Your heart sinks, 3 hens. You have only 4, 1 for your family. The Lord that leaves 2. But the steward insists on 3. The apples, too, are a significant portion of your winter stores. You try to negotiate a desperate, futile attempt. Master Giles, the hens are small this year. We need them for the winter. Master Giles sighs, a theatrical sound. The Lord's needs are great, Thomas, and your obligations are clear. Failure to meet them carries its own unpleasant consequences. He gestures vaguely towards the stocks, a grim reminder of the Lord's justice. You know better than to argue further. You return home, your stomach a hollow ache, your mind racing. Day, you learn that these external pressures are as relentless as the changing seasons. It's not just about the sweat of your brow in the fields, it's about the portion of that sweat that is immediately claimed by others. Has its demands. Father Michael, a kindly man but also a servant of the church, soon be arriving to collect the tithe for the church itself, another 10th of your harvest, another 10th of your labour's reward. Addition to the usual Sunday offerings, a small coin or a handful of grain. You remember a passage from a monastic chronicle of manuscript I once studied in the archives of Canterbury. It spoke of the tenths of the harvest, the first fruits, the serfs given freely to the glory of God, and the upkeep of his servants. It sounded noble then, a spiritual offering. Now, feels like another hand reaching into your already depleted stores. Later, as you attempt to mend a broken hoe, Eleanor approaches. The Lord's men were here, she whispers, her voice trembling. They took 2 of our hens. They said the Lord requires a day of boon, work in the Lord's forest, his new hunting lodge, boon work, labour owed directly to the Lord, unpaid and often exhausting, day stolen from your own fields, another day where your own crops go untended. This is the constant drain, reason why, even after a successful harvest, your stores are never truly abundant. Why you live on the precipice of hunger, why a bad harvest can spell disaster. You look at your hands, calloused and rough, harvested, and now they must also labour for the Lord's pleasure, siphoned away before they can truly sustain you. It's a monotonous, unforgiving existence, constant struggle against forces far beyond your control. The sheer, unrelenting sameness of it all, punctuated by these external demands. The most soul-crushing aspect, it's a life where the horizon always seems to be just out of reach. Weight of obligation is a constant, heavy cloak. The sun has begun its descent, casting long shadows across the fields, growing colder, and the gnawing in your stomach is a dull, persistent ache. You will eat a thin broth tonight, with a crust of dark, heavy bread. Tomorrow the cycle of labor will begin anew. The shadow of the Lord's demands will loom just as large. As the stars begin to prick the darkening sky, you can almost feel the weight of centuries of such leaves pressing down. You wonder, with a sigh that is more weariness than hope, tomorrow will bring what further burdens will be placed upon your already strained existence. With a certainty that chills you more than the evening air, that the struggle for mere survival is a constant companion in this world. The archaeological evidence tells us stories that Hollywood never bothered to explore. The arduous, the utterly unglamorous existence that formed the bedrock of medieval society. And damsels in distress, the real story, the one etched in bone fragments and pottery shards, one of relentless toil and a diet so stark it could chill the soul. Imagine if you can, waking not to the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, chill of a wattle and daub hut, the rough wool blanket scratching against your skin. Your first conscious thought isn't about the day's agenda, but about the gnawing emptiness in your belly, a constant companion. The world around you evolves not with the swiftness of modern innovation, but with the slow, inexorable turn of the seasons, sun's arc and the earth's yielding. Your days, as Thomas, manor of Oakhaven in the year of our Lord 1285, are painted in shades of brown and grey. The most vibrant colour you might encounter is the dull green of boiled cabbage or the earthy brown of pottage. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a hunk of coarse dark bread, often made from rye or barley, so dense it feels like chewing on packed earth. Is functional, it fills the void, but offers no joy. Sometimes, if the harvest has been particularly meagre, Lord's demands have been especially rapacious, this bread is all you'll have until evening. The world around you evolves from the faint light of dawn filtering through the single, unglazed opening in your hut, midday sun on the muddy fields, and finally to the deepening shadows of dusk. Lunch is often more of the same. Pottage, a thick stew made from whatever vegetables are available: turnips, parsnips, onions, handful of peas or beans if you're fortunate. This is boiled for hours over a communal fire, brackish from the local well. The flavour is monotonous, a lingering earthiness that coats your tongue. Luxury so rare it's almost mythical. Perhaps on a feast day, or if a pig has been slaughtered for winter stores, get a sliver of salted pork or a scrap of rabbit stewed into the pottage. The sheer lack of variety is staggering. Modern supermarket aisle overflowing with choices, then strip it all away, leaving only the barest essentials. Table, you might hear Eleanor, your wife, sighing as she stirs the pot, her face etched with weariness. Another day, she might say, her voice flat, the pottage is thin again. The Lord's men took 2 of our chickens yesterday. King's provisioning. You nod, your throat tight. There's no point in complaining. Your hands, calloused and stained with soil, as you reach for another piece of bread. The world around you evolves, not through grand pronouncements. Subtle shifts in the landscape, the green shoots of spring, the golden waves of ripening wheat in summer, the bare, skeletal trees of winter. These are your milestones. The food reflects this cycle, but the underlying lack of diversity remains. The harvest is good, the surplus doesn't truly belong to you. A significant portion, often half or more, Lord as rent and tithes to the church. This leaves precious little for your own family on the same meagre staples day in and day out. I discovered in the manor court rolls for Oakhaven, dated 1285, Sir Reginald de Montfort had levied an extra tax on grain that year to fund his participation in a minor border skirmish in Wales. This directly impacted the serfs' food stores to subsist on even less. The absence of pleasure in food is a significant aspect of this existence. Spices to enliven the taste, no culinary artistry to elevate a meal. It is purely sustenance. You eat to survive, strength to work the fields again tomorrow. The simple act of enjoying a meal, of savoring flavors, is a forgotten luxury. You might remember vaguely a story your grandfather told of a time when his father, a generation before, to catch a wild salmon from the river. The memory itself tasted richer than anything you've eaten recently, is often a quiet lament. Will it always be like this? Cycle of work and want, the thought is quickly suppressed. To dwell on it is to invite despair, a luxury you cannot afford. Your clothing, too, contributes to the muted sensory experience. Spun wool, dyed with drab colors like brown or grey using plant-based dyes. It's practical, providing warmth. Scratchy against your skin, a constant, low-level irritation. The world around you evolves in its textures, from the smooth, cool stone of the church floor on Sundays to the rough, splintered wood of your plough. Your worn leather shoes offer little protection against the mud and stones of the path. The air you breathe carries the scent of damp earth, wood smoke, and the ever-present aroma of livestock. One evening, as you sit by the dying embers of the fire, Eleanor speaks again, her voice barely a whisper. Young William coughed through the night, is settling in his chest. You look at your son, sleeping fitfully on a straw-filled pallet in the dim light. This is the harsh reality. Malnutrition weakens the body, making it susceptible to illness. Simple cold can become a life-threatening condition. The lack of fresh fruits and vegetables, the scarcity of protein, damp, it all conspires against you. You remember reading in a monastic medical text, a treatise on humours was essential for health, but balance for you is a distant dream. You are a cog in a vast, unforgiving machine, dictated by the needs of the Lord and the Church, your sustenance dictated by the earth's yield and the whims of those above you. The world around you evolves, but for you, the fundamental struggle for survival remains constant. This is not a life of grand adventure, quiet endurance. The most exciting event of your week might be the Sunday sermon, a brief respite from labor, perhaps the occasional arrival of a traveling merchant, bringing with him rumors from afar and perhaps a small trinket, a brightly colored ribbon for Eleanor, or a metal buckle for your tunic. But even these moments are fleeting, overshadowed by the relentless reality of your existence. You look at the rough, hewn wooden bowl before you of the day's pottage, and a profound sense of weariness washes over you. It's a weariness that goes beyond the physical exhaustion born from the sheer, unremitting monotony of it all. Tomorrow the sun will rise, the fields will beckon, the pottage will be waiting, and the day after that, and the day after that, the world around you evolves. And as you prepare to rest, the subtle shift from the dim light of the fire to the absolute darkness of the night mirrors the slow, acceptable nature of your own life's progression. There are no dramatic turning points, no sudden leaps forward, just the steady passage of time marked by the changing seasons and the ever-present hum of survival. As sleep claims you, conscious thought might be of the taste of that mythical salmon, a phantom flavor in the darkness, a whisper of a world where food was not merely fuel but a source of simple, unadulterated pleasure. And as you drift off, you can't help but wonder what the next day will bring. knowing with a certainty that chills you to the bone. The further back we go, the more we realize how much courage ordinary life required. It wasn't the grand battles or the coronations that demanded true fortitude, but the quiet, relentless grind of existence. You've seen the movies, read the books, but the lived reality was something else entirely, a stark testament to human resilience in the face of overwhelming simplicity. Part 9 explored the back-breaking labor of separating grain from chaff, a task that consumed hours, days, and seasons. Part 10 delved into the crushing weight of obligations, taxes, tithes, and endless labor owed to the Lord of the Manor, already meager resources. And Part 11 painted a picture of a diet so monotonous, so utterly devoid of variety, the most enthusiastic gourmand would despair bread, pottage, and little else to break the bleak culinary cycle. Now, a little deeper into the fabric of this medieval existence, we turn our gaze inward to the very heart of where you live, to the cramped and unhygienic reality of your dwelling, the hut. Slowly but surely understand the profound lack of domestic comfort and personal space, not to the gentle hum of a refrigerator or the soft glow of an alarm clock. Chill that seeps into your very bones, a persistent, unwelcome companion. The hut, a humble structure of wattle and daub, with a thatched roof that leaks with the slightest drizzle, is your world. Its single room, shared with your entire family, and sometimes even a few farm animals for warmth, offers no sanctuary, no private corner. With the accumulated smells of unwashed bodies, stale smoke from the central hearth, present aroma of the earth itself clinging to everything, your sleeping mat, straw sack, or simply a pile of dried leaves, lies close to your neighbors. There is no privacy here, personal boundaries to delineate. You might find yourself nudged awake by your brother's restless tossing or the soft snuffling of a pig rooting for stray scraps. The floor, made of packed earth, is perpetually cold and often damp, a breeding ground for unseen creatures. A single small opening, covered with a shutter or a piece of stretched animal hide, serves as your window. Slivers of light and meager ventilation. Darkness is the default state, broken only by the flickering of a tallow candle or the meager embers of the fire. The furnishings are basic to the extreme. A rough-hewn wooden table, stained by years of use, might serve as your dining surface and workspace. A few clay pots and wooden bowls are your only culinary accoutrements. There are no shelves for storing possessions, chests to keep your meager belongings safe. Everything is within reach and within sight of everyone else. Your clothes, coarse wool or linen, are probably kept in a bundle at the foot of your sleeping mat, exposed to the general grime. I discovered in archives from the 14th century, specifically records from a manor in Kent, England, the possessions of a typical serf family. Their inventory listed little more than a pot, a few bowls, a knife, and their bedding. It underscores the sheer scarcity of material goods that defined daily life. Consider the lack of hygiene. There is no running water within the dwelling. Waste is often deposited in a communal midden outside the village, even just a corner of the hut itself, especially during the harsh winter months. Bathing is a rare luxury, times a year, if at all. The constant presence of dirt, fleas, and lice is an accepted reality. Scratch an incessant itch, a familiar sensation that you've learned to live with. Cry from the modern convenience of a hot shower and clean linens, a stark reminder of the immense progress in sanitation we often take for granted. Social interactions within this confined environment are a direct consequence of this lack of personal space, often whispered, carried out in hushed tones in the dim light. little incentive for boisterous activity within the shared confines of the hut. Trying to have a private conversation with your spouse when your children and perhaps even your parents are mere feet away, always attuned to the goings-on. Thomas, your neighbor, might poke his head through the doorway, his face smudged with dirt about the weather, or to borrow a precious handful of salt. Eleanor, he might rasp, his voice hoarse from the cold. Did you hear the Reeve was out inspecting the fields again this morning? Worried about the harvest, he is. Eleanor, your wife, her own voice wary. Thomas, always worried, as if we aren't worried enough ourselves. Their exchange is brief, laced with the shared anxieties of their existence. There's no idle chit-chat, no lengthy discussions of personal feelings. Survival leave little room for such indulgences. You might find yourself observing your own family, subtle shifts in their expressions, the quiet gestures that convey more than words ever could. The shared hardship fosters a unique form of intimacy, a reliance on each other that transcends the discomfort, yet breeds a certain resignation, a quiet acceptance of the limitations of your world. You learn to sleep through the sounds of your family's breathing, to ignore the persistent chill, strange sort of comfort in the familiar, cramped closeness. This shared existence, while lacking privacy, creates a powerful bond to the human need for connection, even in the most challenging circumstances. This close proximity, while at times stifling, that news and gossip spread quickly within the family unit, creating a micro-community of shared information and experiences. The world inside the hut is a microcosm of the larger world outside, a world dictated by the seasons, the harvest, demands of the Lord. Your understanding of personal space, of privacy, of comfort, fundamentally reshaped by these cramped, unhygienic, and shared living conditions. You learn to find your own small pockets of peace, to carve out moments of quiet contemplation amidst the constant proximity of others. As the embers of the fire begin to die down, dancing shadows across the rough, hewn walls, with the profound realization that even the most basic necessities of life, like a private corner to call your own, for most in this era. This intimate, shared space, though lacking in modern comforts, a different kind of human connection, one built on shared struggle and mutual reliance, a connection that will be further explored as we delve into the limited social interactions that this environment fostered. In the quiet of your room, let's step into a world where silence had different meanings. It wasn't the peaceful hush of a modern bedroom, a pregnant stillness punctuated by the rustling of straw, the distant bleating of sheep, or the creak of a neighbour's wooden shutter. As a serf in the manor of Oakhaven, circa 1340, was a meticulously observed one. Privacy, understood it from your previous existence, was a forgotten luxury. Every action, every whispered word, there was a potential ripple in the tightly knit pond of village life. Your understanding deepens as you consider the social fabric of Oakhaven. There were no grand balls, no bustling marketplaces beyond the infrequent, heavily regulated local fairs. Your social sphere was confined to the handful of families who shared the same muddy track leading to your dwelling, the same communal well, the same stark chapel under the watchful eye of Father Michael. Interactions were dictated by necessity and tradition. You saw Thomas, his face perpetually etched with the grime of the fields at dawn when you both trudged towards the Lord's demesne. Plods with Eleanor, her hands raw from mending rough-spun cloth as she collected water, her eyes rarely meeting yours for more than a fleeting moment. Friendships forged through shared interests or spontaneous laughter, the necessary acknowledgements of coexistence in a shared struggle. The constant observation was a subtle, pervasive force. Eyes were always upon you. The old woman, Agnes, who sat by her doorway spinning wool, her gaze sharp as a needle, seemed to miss nothing. With their grubby faces and boundless energy, were natural scouts relaying any unusual activity back to their parents. Pigs rooting in the muck seemed to possess an uncanny awareness of who was passing by. There was no escape from this collective gaze. By the stream, if you spoke a word too loud, if you simply sat with a look of unusual contemplation. This wasn't malicious gossip in the modern sense, but a vital survival mechanism, a community where every resource was scarce, where the Lord's favor could mean the difference between a meager existence and starvation. Knowing what your neighbors were doing and what they thought of you was paramount. I discovered in the archives of St. Jude's Parish of manorial court rolls from the mid-14th century detailing minor infractions. Fines were levied for failing to repair a section of the communal fence, for allowing your pig to stray into another's plot, for speaking ill of the reeve. Paint a stark picture of a society where individual liberty was severely curtailed by the needs of the collective and the demands of the Lord. Was not your own, not truly. It was a series of obligations, a performance for the unseen audience of your community, internal monologue. You wanted to sing a song, perhaps a ballad you dimly recalled from your past life, felt alien and inappropriate in this context. You longed to sketch the intricate pattern of frost on your window pane, calloused and stiff, accustomed only to the rough feel of flax and the blunt edge of a sickle. Even your thoughts felt exposed, as if the villagers could somehow divine your unspoken desires, your weariness, your quiet despair. Of personal space extended beyond the physical. There was no room for introspection, no encouragement for individual ambition. Your purpose was to serve the land, to contribute to the manor's output, and to reproduce the cycle of labor for the next generation. Damp morning, while mending a broken handle on your hoe, Thomas shuffled past, his shoulders stooped. Is watching the south field today. He grunted, his voice rough as the soil. Says the Lord wants to see more grain, to be caught idle. You nodded, your stomach tightening. The reeve, a man named Edmund, was the Lord's appointed overseer, figure who moved through the village with an air of perpetual disapproval. His presence was a constant reminder of the hierarchy at the bottom. You remembered a time when a boss's watchful eye was a source of annoyance. Here, tangible threat to your meager sustenance. Later that day, approached as you were gathering firewood near the edge of the Lord's wood. She carried a small, crudely woven basket. "Steward is coming tomorrow," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously towards the manor house. "Collecting the extra eggs from our hens, said the Lord's table needs more variety." She offered you a small from her basket. "It's all I have to spare," she added, her voice barely audible. You took the turnip, scent filling your nostrils, and felt a pang of something akin to gratitude. But it was a fragile thing by the ever-present anxiety. This exchange, so brief, so burdened with unspoken fear, genuine connection you could hope for, it was a shared acknowledgement of your mutual vulnerability. This constant, level scrutiny, this absence of personal sanctuary, stifled any nascent aspirations. What was the point of dreaming of a different life when your every waking moment was consumed by the immediate, the necessary, the observed? There was no intellectual stimulation beyond the pronouncements of the priest, artistic expression beyond the functional crafting of tools and garments. no exploration beyond the familiar boundaries of the manor. Your world was a meticulously defined cage, and the bars were made of social expectation and economic necessity. Privacy wasn't just about avoiding embarrassment, it was about the eradication of the individual self, personal desires into the unyielding demands of the feudal system. This enforced conformity, awareness of being watched, was perhaps the most profound and soul-crushing aspect of this existence, lived in the perpetual twilight of communal judgment, where the brighter spark of individuality was quickly extinguished by the chilling wind of scrutiny. As the sun dips below the horizon, shadows across the muddy lanes, you feel the familiar weight of the day settle upon you. The sounds of the village begin to quiet, but the watchful eyes, you suspect, never truly close. Tomorrow will bring more of the same rhythm of labor and observation. Yet, as you prepare to rest your weary head on your straw-filled pallet, a faint question lingers, a whisper of what might lie beyond the immediate, beyond the watchful eyes of Oak Haven. Perhaps act of enduring. There is a subtle form of resistance, a quiet testament to the human spirit's enduring, monotonous of lives. And this enduring, this quiet continuation, leads us to consider the very nature of community and how it shapes individual identity when there is no escape. Never quite capture the texture of daily life in this remarkable era, certainly not the pervasive, tangible weight of something far more profound than the chill of the morning mist or the ache in your bones. It's the shadow of the church, stretching long and deep across every village green, every furrowed field, every hushed dwelling. Not to the chirping of birds outside your small window, but to the distant, sonorous tolling of the church bell, dictates the rhythm of existence from the first light of dawn to the final descent into darkness. This isn't merely a place of worship, it is the absolute center of your universe, the arbiter of your destiny. And the next, the very air you breathe seems to carry the scent of incense and damp stone, reminder of its omnipresence. The weeks pass, and you discover the true extent of the church's dominion is not a choice, it is a mandate as unyielding as the Lord's demand for labor. You stand, with your fellow villagers in the echoing nave of St. Jude's, the rough-hewn wooden pews pressing into your knees. Father Michael, his voice amplified by the stone walls, speaks in Latin, a language that washes over you like a tide, largely inaccessible, yet its authority absolute. His sermons are a tapestry woven with threads of divine love and terrifying retribution. He speaks of the celestial city, unimaginable beauty and peace, a reward for unwavering devotion, but more frequently, vivid pictures of the inferno, a place of eternal torment for the unrepentant sinner, a fate that chills you to the bone. Catechism, the fundamental tenets of faith, not through intellectual curiosity, but through rote memorization. The parish priest, and reinforced by the fear etched onto the faces of your elders. The concept of original sin is not an abstract theological debate. It is a palpable burden, a stain on your very soul from birth. Every idle thought, every moment of doubt is a potential path to damnation. Hope, when it flickers, found in personal achievement or worldly success, for those are largely unattainable and often discouraged. Instead, is a fragile butterfly clinging to the promise of salvation in the afterlife, enduring the hardships of this earthly existence with piety and obedience. You discover how this pervasive religious dogma stifles any nascent stirrings of personal ambition or creative expression, excellence in your craft, when your eternal soul is the only currency that truly matters. Carvings on the wooden altar, glass windows depicting scenes from the Bible. These are the expressions of artistry, sanctioned and directed by the church. Your own hands, calloused and strong from working the soil, are meant for tilling fields and mending fences, sketching dreams or composing melodies. I discovered in archives from the 14th century church records from a small village in Normandy that any deviation from prescribed religious practices, even the singing of secular songs, could be met with severe penance, further illustrating this stifling atmosphere. Personal outlet. This suppression of individuality contributes to the profound monotony of life. Paint a vibrant landscape, but being told only to depict the somber hues of religious iconography, and even then, to the watchful eye of the church elders, it's like trying to breathe in a room filled with thick, grey smoke. Weeks pass and you have a quiet conversation with Thomas, a fellow villager whose face seems permanently etched with a weary resignation. You sit by the Meja fire in his small smoke-filled hut, the air thick with the smell of dried herbs and the faint, earthy odour of livestock. His wife, Eleanor, is tending to a pot of thin gruel, the only sustenance you've seen her prepare for weeks. Spoke of the coming harvest festival. You venture, trying to inject a note of anticipation into your voice. Thomas sighs, seems to carry the weight of generations. He did. He reminded us that the tithe must be paid before any feasting begins. God's portion, he calls it. It's always God's portion. He gestures with a gnarled finger towards the rough wooden cross hanging above his sleeping pullet. Says it's for our salvation. But sometimes, my friend, I wonder if it's just another way to keep us down. Make sure we remember who holds the reins. Eleanor, without looking up from her pot, adds softly, says it's God's will that we suffer here, so we may be rewarded in heaven. The waiting for heaven feels like a lifetime. Her words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken longing. You nod, standing dawning with a chilling clarity. This isn't just about faith, it's about control. The church, doctrines and promises of eternal reward or punishment, provides a framework that dictates not just your spiritual life, entire existence. It discourages questioning, punishes deviation, and offers a singular, narrow path to salvation. This constant reinforcement of dogma, coupled with the ever-present fear of damnation, effectively extinguishes personal ambition. A skill, develop a talent, harbor a dream when the ultimate goal is simply to avoid eternal suffering and gain entry into a paradise that feels impossibly distant. This societal structure, while providing a semblance of order, vacuum where personal growth and individual expression should flourish, it's a subtle yet powerful form of control. Insidious than the physical chains of serfdom, it binds the mind, not just the body. You find yourself observing the routines of your fellow villagers with a new perspective, or a predictable cycle of labor, prayer, and sleep, punctuated by the pronouncements from the pulpit. There are no grand ambitions, no passionate pursuits, no burning desires that stray from the path laid out by the church. Even the simple act of storytelling, a way to pass the time and share experiences, is often framed within religious narratives. You realize that the absence of personal ambition is not a personal failing, consequence of this all-encompassing spiritual and social order. It's a life lived in perpetual anticipation of a hereafter, with little room for the vibrant, messy, and often beautiful experiences of the present. This pervasive influence, this carefully constructed system of belief and fear, is perhaps the most profound aspect of what it means to live as a serf in this era. A constant low hum of spiritual obligation that underpins every facet of your existence. And as the evening settles, shadows across the village, you can't help but wonder what other invisible forces shape the lives of those around you. Subtle currents guide their thoughts and actions, preparing you for the next layer of understanding. History settles gently on your shoulders as our story begins, a comforting blanket woven from the threads of centuries. Quiet village of Oakervan, nestled in the rolling hills of Wessex, England, circa 1086. Breathe is thick with the scent of damp earth, wood smoke, and the ever-present aroma of livestock. Sunlight, diffused by the perpetual haze of open fires, struggles to penetrate the low, hanging eaves of the wattle and daub cottages. You, a humble serf bound to the land of Lord de Warenne, feel the familiar, unyielding rhythm of your existence. There is no grand ambition here, no soaring dream of becoming a knight or a learned scholar. Your destiny, very soil beneath your worn leather boots, is to toil. Hours turn to days as you rise before the sun, pre-dawn air biting at your exposed skin through the coarse weave of your tunic. Your hands, calloused and ingrained with dirt, instinctively reach for the rough-spun blanket, the only luxury in your small, smoky dwelling. Packed earth, damp and cool, even in the height of summer. A single, flickering rushlight casts dancing shadows on the walls. A simple, functional nature of your surroundings, a straw-filled mattress, a wooden chest for your meager possessions, a crude stool. The sounds are also familiar, the distant lowing of cattle, the crowing of a rooster, snores of your wife Eleanor sleeping beside you. Your day begins with a meager breakfast, usually a hunk of dark, perhaps softened with a little water or ale. The taste is earthy, dense, and filling, for sustenance rather than pleasure. You join the other men of the village, a silent, shuffling procession towards the fields. Boisterous greetings, no discussions of the day's prospects. Each man knows his role, his task, demands of the land. Today, like most days, is for ploughing. You grip the heavy wooden plough, its share biting into the stiff, clay soil. The oxen, their breath misting in the cool air, strain against their yokes, bodies moving with slow, deliberate power. The rhythm of the work is relentless. You walk behind the plough, your muscles aching, your back bowed. The sun climbs higher, beating down on your head, but there is no shade to seek. As you observe your fellow villagers, Old Man Hemlock, his back permanently stooped, moves with a painful slowness, rasping in his chest. Young William, barely a man, tries to keep pace, his face a mixture of determination and exhaustion. No room for individual expression, no encouragement for innovation. If you were to suggest a different way to plough, it would be met with suspicion, perhaps even fear. The system is ancient, ingrained. Any deviation is seen as a threat to the delicate balance of survival. You remember a fleeting thought, a spark of curiosity, about how the Lord's steward, a man named Robert, managed the accounts for the manor. You'd once seen him with a quill onto parchment. But the thought of asking him, of venturing beyond your designated sphere felt as impossible as flying. As you experience the deep-seated societal expectations stay in your place. This wasn't just an abstract concept. It was woven into the fabric of daily life. Your father was a serf, his father before him, and so would your son be. Apprenticeships to learn a trade, no opportunities to travel to distant cities and hone a skill. For carpentry, you'd still be expected to plough the fields. If you had a gentle touch with animals bound to the Lord's land, the concept of social mobility, of rising through merit or talent, as alien as the stars in the night sky, I discovered in archives at the Bodleian Library. manorial records from the 11th century that even the allocation of land was hereditary. A strip of land in the common field was passed down from father to son, ensuring the continuation of the same agricultural practices. Social stratification for generations. One afternoon, as you rest by the edge of the field, wiping sweat from your brow, Robert rides past on his sturdy mare. He is clad in a fine woolen tunic, a stark contrast to your rough-spun garb, polished, his face clean. He pauses, his gaze sweeping over the labourers. "Thomas," he calls out easily on the breeze. "The Lord requires more grain this season. See that you work diligently." You nod, catching in your throat. "Yes, Master Robert." He turns his horse, his cloak billowing behind him. You watch him ride away, figure of authority and privilege. You think for a moment of the small, carefully carved wooden bird you made one winter evening, pastime hidden from view. It was a small thing, but it brought you a flicker of quiet satisfaction. No one to show it to, no one who would understand its value beyond a fleeting curiosity. Later that week, while gathering firewood in the Lord's woods, a privilege, of course, required strict adherence to rules about what could be taken, you encounter Agnes, the wife of another serf. She is stooped, branches, her face etched with weariness. "Thomas." She greets you, her voice raspy. "A hard season," grunt in agreement. "The rain came late and the sun is fierce." She sighs, her shoulders slumping. "My youngest, little Mary," she coughs something dreadful. "I wish I had some of that honey from the beehives by the manor house." Soothes the throat. You know the bee hives belong to the Lord, and taking from them would be considered theft. Serious offense. "We have no such a luxuries, Agnes," you say, a tinge of resignation in your voice. "I have only what the earth gives us and what the Lord allows. This is the stark reality. Your needs, your desires, are secondary to the established order. There's no training for nursing of herbal remedies beyond what your mother might have passed down. And even that was limited. That offers no upward mobility, no chance to develop even the simplest of skills beyond the one you were born into. Unchangeable destiny. The days bleed into one another, a monotonous cycle of sowing, tending, and harvesting. The seasons change, but the work remains the same. Variation is the increasing pressure from the Lord and his steward to produce more. You've heard whispers of discontent, have tried to leave to seek a better life, but the consequences are severe. You recall the story of John, escape to a distant town. He was caught, brought back, and publicly flogged. The memory serves as a potent deterrent. It reinforces the understanding that your life, however monotonous, however unfulfilling, is also a fragile thing, broken by the weight of the system. This lack of agency, this enforced stillness, is the most profound aspect of your existence. Quiet hum of resignation. It is a stark contrast to the modern world, where even with its own challenges, learning a new skill, changing careers, or simply pursuing a personal passion is a fundamental given. Here, such concepts are not even imagined. Your path is set, your future a mirror of your past, is a dangerous indulgence. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, you gather your tools. The ache in your bones is a familiar companion. You know that tomorrow will be much the same, and the day after that. The relentless sameness is the true burden of your life. Testament to a world where personal ambition was not just discouraged, but effectively impossible. People think they understand this historical period, but nothing could be further from the truth. They envision knights and castles, feasts and chivalrous deeds, but the reality, for the vast majority, the serfs bound to the land, etched in a relentless cycle of toil punctuated by the ever-present spectre of illness and injury, not to the clang of armor, but to the dull ache in your bones, a familiar companion from the damp straw mattress beneath you. Small, wattle, and daub dwelling is thick with the smell of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and the faint, ever-present scent of animal dung from the lean to attach to your home, differently when your existence is measured not by minutes or hours, but by the rising and setting of the sun. Seasons. Today, a persistent cough rattles in your chest, a dry, hacking sound that promises no relief. Your wife, Elara, worry lines that mirror the furrows in the fields, offers you a wooden bowl of thin, watery gruel. The taste is bland, sustenance meager. She herself looks gaunt, her fingers roughened by endless spinning of wool and tending to the meagre vegetable patch. In 1347, and while the Black Death has not yet ravaged these lands, the common ailments of the time are a constant, insidious threat. A simple cut can fester, a fever can quickly incapacitate, and without any understanding of hygiene or effective remedies, own defenses are often all you have. You remember the previous harvest, how young Thomas, your neighbor's son, succumbed to a festering wound on his leg after a fall from a cart. His parents, their faces a mask of grief and helplessness, watch as the infection spread, turning his limb black. There were no physicians to call upon, no antiseptic washers. Wise woman, old Agnes, offered poultices of herbs that smelled strongly of earth and damp leaves, but her remedies were often as likely to cause further irritation as to heal. She herself was frail, body ravaged by age and the ailments she fought daily. You recall seeing her last week, her breath shallow, with a milky film, likely cataracts, a common affliction that would have rendered her almost blind. Your own hands, and cracked, tremble slightly as you lift the bowl. The chill in the air seeps into your very bones, that never truly leaves, even in the height of summer. The thatched roof of your dwelling offers little insulation. The wind whistles through the gaps in the wattle walls, carrying with it the distant bleating of sheep and the lowing of oxen. Outside, O cavern, nestled beside a sluggish, muddy river, is already stirring. Rough-spun tunics and woolen leggings move about, their movements slow and deliberate, dictated by the demands of the land. A stark contrast to the low-lying dwellings pierces the grey sky, testament to the power of faith in a world that offered so little tangible comfort. Time moves differently when the most significant event of your week is the Sunday sermon. You remember Father Michael's booming voice, his pronouncements on sin and salvation echoing through the stone walls of the parish church. He spoke of divine will, suffering as a path to redemption. While you understood the need for faith, free from the constant struggle of this one, it offered little solace when your youngest, little Mary, 3 days, her small body racked with convulsions, Elara had sat by her side, her lips moving in silent prayer, her face a portrait of desperate hope. The priest had visited, offering a blessing and a prayer, but no medicine beyond to trust in God's plan. Thankfully, Mary had pulled through a fragile victory against the odds. View of that absolute powerlessness remained a raw wound, the fields await. Today, the Lord's demesne, the fertile land directly managed by Baron Fitzwilliam, your own small strip of land, less productive soil will have to wait. The Lord's land must be tended first, its yield guaranteed. System that feels immutable, a natural order ordained by God and tradition. You recall a conversation with Thomas, accident lamenting this very fact. If only we had more time for our own plots. He'd sigh, sweat from his brow with a grimy sleeve. The Lord's land always comes first, and then the winter comes, have enough to see us through. He'd spoken of the rumours from further south, of a new type of farming, enclosed and worked more efficiently. But here in Oak Haven, change arrived at a glacial pace, if at all. You pull on your tunic, the rough wool scratching against your skin. The seams are worn thin. A patch near the shoulder is a testament to Elara's diligent, though often futile, mending. Your boots, sturdy but cracked leather, precious commodity, worn only when absolutely necessary. The cold will soon seep through the thin soles if you're not careful. As you step outside, bites at your exposed face. The smell of damp earth and decaying leaves fills your nostrils. The sky is a uniform grey, sunshine. The village itself is a collection of simple structures clustered around the church, lazily from a few chimneys, the only sign of early activity. The sounds are muted, the distant crowing of a rooster, cattle, the murmur of voices as villagers begin their day. I discovered in the archives of the Bodleian Library a reference to a peasant's inventory from the year 1350, detailing possessions that were remarkably similar to what you would carry: a sickle, a crude wooden ploughshare, and perhaps a worn leather sack for carrying tools or meagre provisions. There were no spare clothes, no tools for comfort or leisure. Life was about survival, about coaxing sustenance from a reluctant earth. Even basic sanitation, the communal use of privies, the proximity of animals to living spaces meant that diseases like dysentery and influenza were rampant. A common cold could easily become pneumonia. A minor stomach upset could lead to dehydration and death. It was a stark reminder that our modern understanding of germ theory, our antibiotics, our vaccines, these are not mere conveniences, saving miracles that would have seemed like sorcery to these people. Differently, when you consider the sheer lack of personal agency, you are tied to the land, to the Lord of the Manor, is not your own. Even your marriage, your children are subject to the Lord's approval, or at least his indifference. Individual rights of personal freedom is a distant, alien notion. You are a cog in a vast, ancient machine to serve the land and its master. This lack of control, this inherent vulnerability, suffocating aspect of this existence. It's a quiet desperation that permeates every aspect of life, of anxiety beneath the surface of daily routine. As you walk towards the fields, the cold seeping into your feet, emerge from the dwelling, carrying a small bundle. She will go to the village market, weekly affair where villagers trade surplus, a few eggs, a handful of dried beans, perhaps a bit of cheese. She'll likely trade for a bit of salt, a precious commodity, or perhaps a length of coarser thread for mending. She catches your eye and offers a faint, wary smile, a silent acknowledgement of the shared burden. The path ahead is muddy and rutted, passage of carts, and the hooves of animals. The air is damp and carries the earthy scent of the fields, both comforting in its familiarity and grim in its association with endless labor. You know that tomorrow, and the day after, that will be much the same. The only certainty is the relentless cycle, present threat of what might befall you when your body, so frail and unprotected, inevitably fails, settles around you now. Imagine darkness that meant something completely different. Not the gentle, ching twilight that signals the end of a day's work and the promise of rest, but a profound, all-encompassing blackness that was not merely an absence of light, but a palpable presence, thick with the smell of damp earth and wood smoke. that whispered of vulnerability. You, as Thomas, a serf bound to the lands of Baron de Montaigne in the year of our Lord 1247. This darkness intimately. It was the darkness of the unlit hovel, the darkness of the forest at night, and, most chillingly, of the Baron's absolute power. Your awareness sharpened by the constant undercurrent of unease that permeated serf life to the morning. The rough, spun tunic, woven from coarse wool, scratched against your skin as you stirred from your straw-filled pallet. The air in the hovel was thick with the mingled scents of stale sweat, drying herbs, and the ever-present aroma of the pigsty just outside was already by the meagre fire coaxing a few embers to life. The thin they were preparing offered little comfort, a watery testament to the scarcity that defined your existence. The biting wind, a constant companion in the early spring of the Loire Valley, rattled the ill-fitting wooden shutters, a sound that always carried a hint of menace. As the seasons changed, so too did the anxieties that shadowed your days. Today had a specific, sharp edge. Yesterday, during the communal ploughing of the Baron's south field, a shard of flint by the steward had struck your ploughshare, chipping it. It was a minor incident, a common occurrence in the unforgiving soil. The steward, a portly man named Guillaume with a perpetually sour expression, had seen it. Guillaume's reports to the Baron were not always characterized by fairness or leniency. You remember the conversation with Eleanor. Guillaume saw you'd muttered, your voice low, the fear a cold knot in your stomach. He said I was being careless, that I was disrespecting the Baron's tools. Ilar, her face etched with worry, had sighed as she stirred the gruel. Careless. Thomas, it was an accident. The ground is full of flints. What can you do? Her eyes, usually kind, held a deep wayness. Pray the Baron is not in a foul mood. This was the crux of it. There was no recourse. Peel. The Baron's word was law. A damaged ploughshare, a missed day of labour due to sickness, perceived insolence, any of these could lead to a swift, often brutal, punishment. Monastic archives at St. Pierre, Les Champs, a few years back, records detailing punishments for similar offences. A serf named Pierre was fined 3 days' labour and given 20 lashes for failing to appear for a mandatory Saints' Day feast. In 1241 was confined to the Baron's dungeon for a week, his rations severely limited. The quality of the seed corn. These were not egregious crimes by modern standards, but in the feudal hierarchy, transgressions against the sacred order. The Baron Henry de Montaigne was a man who embodied the absolute power of his station. Stern, imposing figure, rarely seen by the serfs except during the harvest tithe or when dispensing judgment. His castle, rocky outcrop overlooking the village of Sainte-Marie du Bois, was a formidable stone structure, a constant reminder of his authority. The very air around the castle seemed to hum with the weight of his dominion. Today, from Guillaume, but directly from the Baron's man. At arms, a hulking brute named Roland, glinting dully in the morning sun. Roland's face was a roadmap of old scars, his voice a gravelly rumble. I found you near the pigsty attempting to mend a broken fence with rough, hewn branches. Thomas! The Baron wishes to see you. Roland barked, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The casual way he wielded that weapon, and death sent a fresh wave of dread through you. Your heart hammered against your ribs, your hands on your already soiled breeches, the rough fabric doing little to soothe the tremor in your fingers. Yes, Roland, the walk to the castle was short, but it felt like an eternity. Packed paths of the village gave way to the more ordered, albeit still rough, cobblestones leading to the castle gates. Roasting meat, a rare luxury for the serfs, wafted from the kitchens, a tantalizing but distant promise. The air grew colder as you approached the stone walls, the sheer mass of them a physical manifestation of the Baron's power. Through a courtyard where soldiers were practicing drills, their armor clanking, their shouts echoing off the stone. Sheer noise and organized violence were overwhelming. Then you were ushered into the Baron's solar, a large, dominated by a heavy oak table and a roaring fireplace. Sunlight filtered through a narrow, leaded glass window. Long shadows across the flagstone floor. Baron de Montaigne sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. He wore rich velvet, a stark contrast to your own rough wool. Beside him sat Guillaume, a smug look on his face, gestured with a ringed hand towards a stool near the fireplace. Thomas. The Baron's voice was deep and resonant, an authority that seemed to vibrate through the very stones of the castle. Informs me that you were careless with the plowshare yesterday. You swallowed, your throat dry. My lord, you began, trembling slightly. It was an accident, a flint. An accident. The Baron interrupted, his gaze sharp. Accident cost the Baron. He paused, letting the unspoken implication hang in the air. It costs time. It costs effort. The very productivity of my land. A Guillaume chimed in, his voice oily. He was speaking ill of your tools, my lord. Said they were poorly maintained. This was a lie. You'd said no such thing, but what could you do? Accused the steward, heard of suicidal. Your mind raced, searching for any plausible defense, any words that might appease this absolute power. I would never speak ill of your tools, nor disrespect your land. You said, your voice gaining a desperate sincerity, for the opportunity to work your fields. The plowshare was simply, it struck a stone. It is repaired immediately at my own expense. This was a dangerous offer, as you possessed almost nothing. The Baron leaned back, his eyes narrowed. He looked from you to Guillaume and back again. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. You could hear the crackling of the fire, the distant clang of a hammer from the smithy, the thumping of your own heart. Like an eternity, this silent judgment. Finally the Baron spoke. Repairs are the responsibility of the Baron's smith, Thomas. However, he steepled his fingers. Your willingness to offer is noted. But carelessness cannot go unaddressed, is valuable, but therefore for your carelessness and for the alleged disrespect you will forfeit one day's earnings. You will spend tomorrow assisting Roland with the mending of the castle's south wall. Half a day's ration for the week. A relief so potent it made your knees weak, washed over you. As bad as it could have been, no lashing, no dungeon. Just a loss of food and an extra day of back-breaking labor. A gesture of humble gratitude. Thank you, my lord. I am most grateful for your mercy. As the seasons change, of such arbitrary power, the constant awareness of your utter lack of agency becomes a dull ache that never truly disappears. The solar, the Baron's pronouncement a heavy burden, but one you can bear. Yet, the feeling of helplessness, utterly at the mercy of another's whim, lingers. It's a lesson learned anew each day, a fundamental truth of your existence. As you walk back towards the village, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows, you know that tomorrow and the day after, that you will wake up to the same reality, the same vulnerability. This constant uncertainty about what the next day might bring, what small infraction might lead to disproportionate punishment, is the silent terror that underpins the seemingly simple life of a medieval serf. It's a fear that, in its own way, is far more insidious than any immediate physical threat. Forget what you've learned from period dramas. The truth is far more fascinating. Medieval serfdom, far more soul-crushingly monotonous. 17 left you with the stark reality of the Lord's absolute power, a shadow that dictated every aspect of your existence. Now, deeper into the relentless sameness, the kind of unchanging cycle that erodes the spirit more effectively than any overt cruelty. Imagine waking not to the thrill of a new day, but to the dull, predictable thud of the same routine. The sun, see it through the perpetual haze of wood smoke and damp, rises and sets with an indifference that mirrors the apathy settling into your bones. Your world is not a canvas of possibility, but a worn, familiar tapestry, every thread in its place, every pattern repeated ad infinitum. This is the core of the serf's existence. Surprise, a slow, steady drip of the ordinary that can, paradoxically, feel more oppressive than the sharp sting of immediate danger. We're not talking about the occasional dull day where hors d'oeuvre is the default setting, the only setting. You wake up, not to the chirping of birds, of oxen, and the distant, rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer. The straw mattress beneath you is lumpy and smells faintly of stale sweat and dried mud, a scent that has become as familiar as your own breath. Your rough-spun tunic, coarse against your skin, is the same one you wore yesterday, before, and the day before that. It's patched in places with threads of a slightly different hue to the limited resources and the constant need for repair in your small wattle and daub hut is thick with the lingering smell of yesterday's meagre stew, mostly root vegetables, and perhaps a sliver of salted pork. If you were lucky, the single small window, covered with stretched animal bladder to let in a diffused light, offers a view of the same muddy track leading to the same thatched roofs of your neighbours' dwellings. There's no exotic vista, city square, just the quiet, unchanging reality of your village. Your hands, calloused and rough, instinctively reach for the wooden bowl and spoon on the rough-hewn table. Breakfast is a pottage, a thick gruel made from barley or oats, boiled with water and seasoned with a pinch of salt. Sometimes, if the harvest has been good, dried peas or beans added for substance. The taste is bland, earthy, and utterly forgettable. Its fuel, more. You eat quickly, the silence broken only by the sounds of your neighbours stirring in their own huts. There's no idle chatter, playing for the day's adventures. The day's plan is already etched in stone, as immutable as the Lord's decree. You step outside of the morning air bites at your exposed skin. The sky is a uniform grey, perpetual overcast that seems to mirror the mood of the land. The village itself is a collection of simple dwellings and protection, but also for a shared, unvarying existence. The church spire, the tallest structure in sight, silent testament to a different kind of eternity, one that feels distant and abstract compared to the tangible, present drudgery of your daily life. The fields stretch out before you, a patchwork of brown earth and nascent green, same planting, the same weeding, the same harvesting that has occurred for generations. You meet Thomas, your neighbour. His face is etched with the same wariness as yours. Morning, Thomas. You say, your voice a low rumble. He replies, his eyes never quite meeting yours. Another day. He pulls a bucket of water, its rope worn smooth by countless pulls. Men were by yesterday, said the tithe needs to be collected by week's end. Expecting a good yield from the barley, can you nod, a familiar knot of anxiety tightening in your gut? The Lord's demands are a constant pressure, a reminder that even this monotonous existence is not entirely your own. Did they say anything about the fence by the south field? You ask that perhaps some minor improvement might occur. Thomas shakes his head. Nay, just the tithe. Reginald's hunting party will be passing through next week. We're to ensure the paths are clear. No straying from our work. Be mistaken for game. The threat, though veiled, hangs heavy in the air. A casual cruelty, a thoughtless pronouncement from on high. Eat even this predictable rhythm. You begin your day's labor. Today it's weeding the Lord's personal garden. Meticulous, back-breaking, and utterly devoid of any intellectual stimulation. You pull out the persistent dandelions and thistles, your fingers stained with soil. The damp earth and crushed leaves fills your nostrils. You can hear the distant bleating of sheep, the clucking of hens, of life that continues on, oblivious to your internal existential crisis. The sun, when it finally breaks through the clouds, long shadows that mark the slow passage of time, but time itself feels stagnant. Later, spend time repairing the wattle of a neighbor's hut or helping with the communal task of mending the village fence. Conversations are always the same: the weather, the crops, the Lord's latest decree of unrest in a distant town, rumors that are quickly dismissed as irrelevant to your own unchanging world. From Eleanor, a woman a few years your senior, that the pattern of your life is not unique. My mother's mother lived much the same. She tells you, her voice surprisingly gentle as she shows you how to best tie a sheaf of wheat. My grandmother before her, we are born to this, and we die to this. The way of things. I discovered in the parish records of St. Cuthbert's, a small church in Northumberland dating back to the early 12th century, that the average lifespan of a serf was a mere 30-35 years. This wasn't due to dramatic battles or sudden plagues, but the cumulative effect of hard labor, poor nutrition, constant exposure to the elements. Their lives were not a grand narrative, but a series of recurring, almost identical days. It's a stark contrast to our modern lives, where we expect constant novelty, constant advancement, constant change, where the most exciting event might be finding a slightly larger turnip in your patch of land is almost unimaginable. To understand that this isn't about suffering in the dramatic sense, it's about the absence of anything else. It's the slow, the spirit through sheer, unrelenting sameness. The food is the same, the tasks are the same, the faces are the same, even the sky, more often than not, seems to offer the same muted palette of greys and browns. This is the true horror of the serf's existence, not the threat of the whip, but the certainty of the monotonous realization that tomorrow will likely bring nothing new, and neither will the day after that or the year after that. Unending cycle, this quiet despair is the bedrock of your medieval existence. It is the slow burn of a life lived without aspiration, without deviation, without the spark of the unexpected. As the sun begins its descent, sky in hues of orange and purple that you barely register, you prepare for another evening meal of pottage. Long, the labor arduous, yet the feeling is not one of accomplishment, but of a task merely completed, of the cycle ticked off. The quiet anticipation of sleep is not for rest, but for the temporary oblivion it offers before the inevitable return to the same unchanging reality. Tomorrow the oxen will low, blacksmith will hammer, and you will wake up to it all over again. This unending repetition is what truly defines your existence as a medieval serf. A life so predictable, so unchanging, tends to extinguish the very sense of self. Then explore how this profound lack of variation impacts the human psyche, and what small, visible acts of defiance might arise from such an existence. primary sources reveal details that will change how you see this entire period. It's not just about the hardship, the disease, iron grip, though those are undeniably present, as we've touched upon. What the surviving parchment fragments, pieced together by scholars like me in dusty archives, truly illuminate is the emptiness, the vast chasm of unfulfilled potential, the soul-crushing weight of a life lived without spark, without change, hope of change. Imagine a world where your entire existence is dictated by the rhythm of the sun and the demands of the soil, so relentless and unchanging that it begins to erode your very sense of self. Part delves into the breaking point of boredom, unraveling that occurs when the sheer monotony of medieval serfdom becomes an unbearable existential burden. We're moving beyond the external struggles and into the internal landscape, where the true horror of this existence often resided. Day by day, that the world outside your small, mud-walled hovel is a vast, unknowable entity, borders defined by what your eyes can see from the highest point of the village commons, the squat, grey stone of the local church. Before dawn, the chill of the damp straw mattress seeping into your bones. The air in your cramped dwelling, Eleanor and your 2 young children, is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale bread, scent of wood smoke from the previous night's meagre fire. Your rough-spun tunic, woven from coarse wool that chafes your skin, is already damp with condensation. The only light filtering in comes from a small, gaping mouth in the wall that offers little protection from the elements. You rise, your joints stiff and protesting, is already tending to the small hearth, coaxing a reluctant flame from damp kindling. The morning meal is a grim affair, a thick oats water, and perhaps a handful of dried peas. The taste is bland, earthy, and unsatisfying. You eat quickly, the silence punctuated only by the rustle of straw and the soft chewing of your children. Conversations about the day's news, no discussions of dreams or aspirations. Those concepts are luxuries beyond your comprehension. Then the fields call. Today, like yesterday, and like the day before, catered into the Lord's land. You are Thomas, a serf bound to the manor of Lord Geoffrey de Montaigne in the year of our Lord 1187, near the small village of Oakhaven. Your hands, calloused and cracked, grip the rough wooden handle of your plough. The oxen, bodies heaving, pull the heavy implement through the damp earth. The scent of freshly turned soil is strong, a primal aroma. It's a scent you've known your entire life, devoid of any novelty. The rhythmic creak of the plough, the lowing of the oxen, a crow, these are the sounds that form the soundtrack to your existence. You walk behind the plough, gaze fixed on the furrow being cut. It's a straight line, a perfect, unwavering line, mirroring the trajectory of your own life. There is no deviation, no unexpected turn. You swing your arms in a practiced rhythm, your muscles burning with a familiar ache. The sun finally breaks through the persistent grey clouds, offers little warmth. It's just another marker of time, another silent observer of your unending labour. Thomas, a voice calls, rough and weary. It's your neighbour William, his face etched with the same exhaustion that you feel mirrored in your own reflection. If you were ever to see it, William, you reply, hoarse, another day. Aye, and the Lord's steward was by this morning, complaining about the pace. Move faster with our minds. William spits on the ground, a gesture of quiet defiance. Grain this harvest, more when the rains were late and the blight took some of the barley. You nod, but your mind drifts. You remember a story your grandfather told you, a tale passed down through generations of a time before the current Lord. a time when the land was shared differently, but the details are hazy, like mist on a summer morning. The story itself feels like a dream from another life. The church bells chime the hour, a solemn, resonant sound that echoes across the fields. They mark the passage of time, but offer no solace, no hope of a different future. Day by day, even the small moments of respite are tinged with the same oppressive sameness. The midday meal, taken in the open field, is a chunk of hard bread and a sliver of cheese, washed down with water from a skin. You sit with Eleanor, the meager provisions. Her face is drawn, her eyes hollow. Did young Robert help with the weeding? You ask, expectation. He tried. She sighs, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. But his mind wanders. The clouds for a long time, Thomas said he saw shapes like birds, bigger. You feel a pang of something akin to recognition. You remember doing the same as a boy, solace in the ephemeral patterns of the sky. But the weight of responsibility, the sheer unending nature of the work, nascent imagination long ago. Now, Eleanor's quiet worry about their son's wandering thoughts feels like a burden you can't afford to carry. Focus, you say, the words tasting like ash. The Lord's men are not known for their understanding of a boy's dreams. Later, as the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in muted shades of orange and purple, you walk back towards the village. Cooler, and the scent of damp earth is now mingled with the faint, acrid smell of drying dung. Itself is a collection of simple, thatched roof dwellings huddled together for warmth and protection, lazily from their chimneys, a testament to the evening meal being prepared. You pass the church again, its solid stone a stark contrast to the flimsy wattle and daub of your own home. Inside, Father Michael will be preparing for Vespers. Man, they say, can read and write and knows the scriptures. But even his sermons, you've noticed, return to the same themes: obedience, humility, the promise of heavenly reward for earthly suffering. It's a comforting thought for some. For you, it feels like another layer of the same unchanging fabric. That evening, as you huddle around the fire, flames casting dancing shadows on the rough walls, a profound sense of weariness settles upon you. Just the physical exhaustion from a day in the fields. It's a deeper, more insidious fatigue, a weariness of the spirit. Her face illuminated by the firelight, and you see not just your wife, but a fellow traveler on this endless. You see the same quiet resignation in her eyes. This is the breaking point, not a sudden, dramatic explosion, but a slow, insidious erosion of the soul. The sheer, unadulterated boredom of it all. The knowledge that tomorrow will be the same as today. That the crushing weight of existence stripped bare of any novelty, any surprise, any genuine joy. You remember a fleeting thought, a dangerous whisper in the back of your mind. What if this is all there is merely a series of repetitive actions, devoid of any true meaning or purpose? You close your eyes, image of the perfectly straight furrow burned into your mind. The silence of the night presses in, the soft breathing of your sleeping children. You are Thomas, a serf in 1187, and the greatest enemy you face is not the Lord, nor famine, but the suffocating boredom that threatens to extinguish the very spark of your being. Sources in their quiet, factual way whisper this truth, a truth far more terrifying than any battlefield. Sleep finally claims you. A thought, like a persistent ember, glows in the darkness. You wonder, with a desperate, childish curiosity, if there is anything at all that could break this cycle. Perhaps you muse a change in the weather, a visit from a traveling merchant, stray dog wandering into the village, anything that might introduce a ripple into the stagnant pool of your existence. But even this flicker of hope is quickly swallowed by the vast, indifferent expanse of the coming dawn. Probably heard romanticized tales about this period, but the reality was far more complex and, dare I say, dull for the vast majority. Imagine the scent of damp earth mingled with the ever-present aroma of wood smoke and unwashed bodies, rough-spun tunic. This isn't a fleeting fantasy. This is the suffocating, unyielding sameness of your existence. After year, the sun, a distant, indifferent orb, would rise and set, marking the passage of time, not with grand events, predictable rhythm of sunrise, labor, sunset, and a brief, often dreamless, sleep. You might recall a whisper of a life beyond the muddy track leading to your village, a life of knights and castles, the lords, the clergy, the very few who were not tethered to the soil by an unbreakable chain of obligation. The village, the fields, the meager hut, and the endless cycle of cultivation and survival. Air you breathe feels heavy with the weight of generations who lived and died in precisely the same way. Shifts when you consider the sheer physical limitations. Your hands, calloused and cracked, rob that never truly subsides. They know the bite of the hoe, the rough texture of straw, gritty feel of harvested grain. You've seen your own reflection, or rather, the fleeting glimpse in a puddle, is gaunt, weathered, and etched with a wariness that seems to seep from your very bones. The years, not by birthdays but by the passing of harvests and the harsh bite of winter, blur into an indistinguishable continuum. You might close your eyes, and for a fleeting, almost impossible moment, a thought like a bird escaping a cage flits through your mind. Just leave. What if I could walk away from this endless toil, this crushing predictability? Find a different path, a different life. The fantasy is potent, a brief, intoxicating surge of possibility. On a road, not the rutted track to the market town, but a true road, a place where the sky is a different shade of blue, where the air carries new scents, isn't dictated by the plough. Perhaps you imagine a bustling city like London, its towering buildings and throngs of people, each with their own purpose and destination. Conjure the image of a monastery, a place of quiet contemplation and learning, stark contrast to the cacophony of the village. But the thought, as quickly as it arises, is brutally extinguished. The sheer obstacles slam down like a portcullis. Where would you go? With what provisions? A stranger with nothing but the clothes on his back and the ache in his limbs. Your lord, Sir Reginald de Montaigne, your labour, your very existence. To flee would be to invite swift and brutal retribution, display of punishment designed to reinforce the unshakable order of things. The church, represented by Father Michael, obedience and acceptance of one's lot, a divine order that places you firmly in your station. Your family, your neighbours, the same invisible yet ironclad chains. The fantasy crumbles, leaving behind only the familiar taste of resignation. Your perspective shifts when you consider the minuscule details that formed the fabric of your existence. Wool of your tunic, woven by Eleanor, your mother, felt scratchy against your skin, reminder of the labour that went into its creation. Portion of pottage, a watery broth of boiled grains and whatever meagre vegetables could be scavenged or grown, offered little comfort and even less sustenance. Even the simple act of drinking from the communal well, the water cool and tasting faintly of earth and moss, underscored your shared dependency and lack of individual privilege, discovered in the archives of the Wiltshire Record Office through a series of manorial rolls dating back to the late 13th century, obligations of a serf in a village like this one, likely near Salisbury. For instance, 1287 details how a serf named John could not leave his lord's land without permission, and even then pay a fee known as a merchant if he wished to marry someone from outside the manor. This wasn't just about land, ownership of people. You are, in essence, property. The Lord's castle, a distant silhouette against the horizon on a clear day, represented not just a place of defense, but the seat of absolute power. Its stone walls, the banners flying from its turrets, visual reminders of your subordinate status. The church spire rising above the thatched roofs of the village, kind of authority, spiritual rather than temporal, yet equally binding. Father Michael, a stern but not unkind man, sermons on the virtues of humility and the rewards of the afterlife for those who endured hardship with faith. His words, while offering a glimmer of celestial hope, did little to alleviate the gnawing emptiness in your stomach or the weariness in your back. A conversation with Thomas, a fellow villager, his face a map of hardship, his hands gnarled like ancient roots. Another year, another harvest, he'd sighed, leaning on his hoe, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the field. Will it ever be different? You still clinging to that fragile flicker of escape, had dared to whisper, perhaps, if we could just reach the king's court. Thomas had chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. The king's court. For us, we are but ants on his vast estate, John. We serve the Lord serves the king, and God watches over us all. His words, though devoid of malice, were a stark refutation of your fleeting dream. Your perspective shifts when you consider the emotional and psychological toll of this extreme monotony. The lack of novelty, personal agency, it grinds down the spirit. The brief moments of joy, the harvest festival, from a traveling minstrel, the birth of a healthy child, were like sparks in an otherwise vast darkness. By the surrounding gloom, you might find yourself staring at a bird in flight cross the sky, a stark contrast to your own earthbound existence. You might envy its freedom, its ability to simply go. Envy is tinged with a wary acceptance. You are not a bird. You are a serf bound to the land, dictated by the seasons and the will of your lord. This isn't a dramatic narrative of struggle and eventual triumph. It's a slow erosion of the self. The weight of tradition, the fear of the unknown, and the crushing burden of daily survival conspire to keep your aspirations firmly tethered to the familiar, however bleak it may be. Progress, or personal growth, as we understand it today, would be utterly alien. Your purpose was to fulfill your obligations, to contribute to the manor's output, and to perpetuate the cycle. The historical record, as I've seen it documented in monastic chronicles from the period, often focuses on the lives of kings, bishops, and nobles, events of war and politics. The lives of people like you, the vast majority, are often reduced to entries in account books of labor owed and occasional mentions of fines or punishments. It's a silent majority. Existence was defined by the grinding gears of the feudal system. Career choice, or pursuing your passion, is a concept that would have been met with utter bewilderment. Was your birthright, your passion, was the simple act of staying alive until the next sunrise. Perspective shifts when you consider the faint echoes of your former life. The memories, though faded, are like ghosts, edges of your consciousness. You remember the ease of movement, simply decide to walk to the corner shop for a loaf of bread. the freedom to choose what you ate, what you wore. These are luxuries so profound they are almost beyond comprehension in your current reality. This fleeting thought of escape, fantasy, serves not as a genuine plan, but as a stark contrast, a brief, sharp reminder of what has been lost and what can never be regained. It highlights the overwhelming nature of your confinement, making the acceptance of your current state, however grim, all the more inevitable. It's like a brief, blinding flash of sunlight before plunging back into the deep, changing darkness. And as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, you prepare for another night, already turning towards the tasks that tomorrow will inevitably bring, the familiar of your life as a medieval serf. The thought of escape, like a whisper on the wind, has been carried away, the solid, unyielding earth beneath your bare feet. This acceptance, this quiet resignation, is where your journey truly begins. Tomorrow and the days that follow will bring a new set of challenges, a new understanding of the subtle ways in which your world operates. You'll learn more about the unspoken rules, web of relationships, and the quiet resilience of those who, like you, find themselves bound to a life of relentless sameness. What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about this period was incomplete? Not just the grand narratives of kings and battles, fabric of daily existence, the quiet hum of lives lived without fanfare. You've been fed a diet of romanticized hardship, struggles against insurmountable odds. But the truth, as you are now experiencing it, is far more profound in its sheer, yielding monotony. The grand tapestry of history is woven with countless threads of the utterly ordinary, and you, my friend, are now a thread of the most common hue. The weeks pass and you discover that the initial pangs of despair, yearning for a life left behind, have begun to dull. It's a strange, insidious erosion of the spirit, shattering. The vibrant colors of your former existence have faded to a muted sepia, and even the memory of them is becoming hazy. You wake each morning, not to the clang of alarm bells or the chirping of birds, grey light filtering through the cracks in the wattle and daub walls of your small dwelling. The scent of damp earth, stale straw, and the ever-present faint aroma of unwashed bodies is the first thing that greets you. Your rough-spun tunic, she against your skin, is the same one you wore yesterday and the day before that. There's no variety, no change of wardrobe, unfold with a predictable, soul-crushing rhythm. You rise with the sun, a pale, often obscured disk in the heavens, the other villagers in the fields. The work is back, breaking, repetitive, and utterly devoid of intellectual stimulation. Today, barley field, your hands, calloused and cracked, move with a practiced, almost automatic efficiency, slender green shoots that threaten to choke the precious grain. The sun beats down on your head, trickles into your eyes, stinging them, but you barely register the discomfort. The conversation around you is sparse to grunts of effort, occasional warnings about a slippery patch of mud, or the briefest complaints about the weather. Thomas, who shares your small plot of land, works beside you in near silence, his face weathered and lined like a dried riverbed. Any emotion beyond a weary stoicism. This morning, as you pause to wipe your brow with the back of your hand, as the color of faded denim. Another day, he rasps, his voice rough from dessous and the dust. You reply, the words feeling heavy on your tongue. Another day, he nods, a slow, almost imperceptible movement. By yesterday, demanding extra tithes, said the harvest was poor. His gaze drifts to the sky, silent question hanging in the air. How can it be poor when we sweat and bleed for it? You remember with a jolt the year of our Lord 1348 near the village of St. Albans, a time when the Black Death has yet to cast its terrifying shadow. The weight of the feudal system presses down with all its immutable force. You recall reading about the manorial system in your former life, the intricate web of obligations and duties that bound serfs to the land. That serf, the abstract concept, made brutally real. The weeks pass and you discover that the occasional visits from the local priest, Father Michael, the only semblance of intellectual or spiritual diversion. Today he walks through the fields, robes a stark contrast to the earthy tones of your clothing. His face is kind, but his eyes hold a deep, sorrowful understanding of your lot. He stops beside you and Thomas, his hands clasped before him. "Good day, my sons," he says, carrying a gentle resonance. "May God bless your labors." Thomas mumbles a greeting. You manage a more coherent, and you, Father Michael surveys the field. A good yield if the weather holds. Have you heard the news from the nearest market town? Treasury is depleted. More taxes are likely to be levied. He sighs, salation that seems to carry the wariness of the entire realm. It is a heavy burden we all bear. You nod, drifting. You remember the sheer abundance of choice you once possessed, the ability to walk into a shop and select a meal, a piece of clothing, a book. Here, your choices are dictated by the seasons, the lord of the manor, and the unyielding demands of survival. Is as alien as the stars themselves. Evenings are spent huddled around a meagre fire, casting dancing shadows on the rough walls. The food, usually a thick pottage of barley or oats, sometimes supplemented with a meagre portion of salted fish or a rare piece of rabbit if someone is particularly fortunate, offers little in the way of pleasure. The taste is bland, utilitarian. You eat because you must, not because you desire to. The weeks pass and you discover a profound, almost terrifying acceptance. The frantic energy that once fueled your desire to escape has dissipated. It's not a happy acceptance, but a quiet surrender. You understand, a clarity that chills you to the bone, that this is it. This is your life. There is no more. Dreams of returning to your former existence, once so vivid, now feel like the fading echoes of a forgotten song. You are a cog in a vast, unfeeling machine. Your purpose is simply to turn, day after day, year after year. Eleanor, your wife, a woman whose youth is already being etched away by the relentless toil, sits beside you by the fire. Her hands, roughened like yours, mending a torn section of your tunic with a needle fashioned from bone. Her face, illuminated by the firelight, a similar quiet resignation. The harvest will be good, do you think? She asks, her voice soft, almost a whisper. At the faint lines around her eyes, the wariness that has become a permanent fixture on her young face offer her comfort, a false hope, but the words catch in your throat. "We will do our best, Eleanor." You say, feeling hollow even to your own ears. "That is all we can do." But she nods, and for a moment her gaze meets yours. In her eyes, you see a mirror of your own quiet despair, a shared understanding of the vast, dual chasm between the life you once knew and the life you now inhabit. There is no grand rebellion here, no heroic defiance. The slow, steady erosion of the spirit, the quiet acceptance of the mundane, the profound realization that this cycle of labor and want is the entirety of your existence. The world outside your small village, with its kings and its wars, impossibly distant, a realm of myth and legend that has no bearing on your own earthbound reality. Your world has shrunk to the boundaries of this field, this village, this life, and as the fire crackles and dies down, casting long on the walls, you feel a strange, almost comforting stillness descend. The fight is over. To do but to endure. The thought of sleep, a temporary oblivion, becomes the most potent desire of your day. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and the day after that. And so you close your eyes, surrendering to the encroaching darkness, without the spark of anticipation, only the steady, unwavering pulse of existence. As we prepare to explore what life truly meant in another time, the dust of the day, the grit of the fields, a second rougher hide, the sun a molten orb of wary gold, the jagged line of trees that ring the village of Oakhaven. This is not the dramatic sunset of a heroic epic, but the quiet descent of a day like any other. The climax, fleeting surge of adrenaline from the recent skirmish with the poaching lord's men, has long since faded, leaving behind a dull ache in your muscles and a profound weariness in your soul. The immediate aftermath has been the return to the familiar, the utterly mundane. You trudge back towards your small, wattle and daub hut, scent of wood smoke and damp earth filling your nostrils. The air, once crisp with the morning's promise, is now heavy with the day's accumulated labor. Your bare feet, calloused and cracked, press into the packed dirt path, each step a familiar rhythm. The lowing of cattle, the bleating of sheep, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. These are the sounds that have defined your existence, soundtrack to a life lived in the shadow of the castle on the hill, a constant reminder of the hierarchy that binds you. Understanding deepens as you approach your dwelling. The hut is small, a single room with a central hearth. The walls, branches plastered with mud and straw, are damp and cool to the touch. Inside, thick with the lingering smell of peat smoke and the faint, earthy aroma of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Eleanor is already there, her silhouette framed by the flickering firelight. She's stirring a pot of pottage, a thick, unappetizing gruel made from barley, peas, and whatever meager vegetables could be scavenged from their small plot of land. She murmurs, her voice raspy from the day's toil. She doesn't look up from her task, focus entirely on the bubbling contents of the iron cauldron. You nod, dropping your worn wooden hoe by the doorway. From the communal fields, painstakingly harvested under the watchful eye of the reeve, was meagre, a handful of turnips, enough to sustain, perhaps, but never to satisfy. You sink onto the dirt floor beside the hearth, texture of the straw mat beneath you. The fire is a welcome balm against the evening chill that seeps into your bones. Any news from the manor? You ask. Your Vlorts, the lord of the manor, Sir Reginald Fitzwilliam, a man whose name is spoken with a mixture of fear and resentment, absolute sway over your lives. His decrees, his taxes, his demands, they are the invisible chains that bind you. Shakes her head, her dark hair, usually tied back in a simple braid, escaping in wisps around her face. Tithe is to be collected in full, even with the poor harvest. The priest spoke of it after Vespers. Will must be done. Your understanding deepens as you consider the priest, Father Michael, with kind eyes and a perpetually stained cassock, the only source of comfort and spiritual guidance in this harsh existence. He preaches of salvation in the afterlife, a heavenly reward for a life of suffering. It's a soothing balm. It does little to alleviate the gnawing hunger in your belly or the ache in your weary limbs. A passage from a salvaged scrap of parchment, a fragment of a monastic text I discovered in the archives of Sate, near Canterbury, dating from around 1150 AD. monastic ideal of ev ora et labora, pray and work, a life dedicated to God's service. But for you, simply vive libera, with prayer as a whispered hope for a future you could barely conceive. Eleanor ladled the pottage into 2 rough-hewn wooden bowls. The smell is bland, earthy, hint of something vaguely vegetal. You eat in silence, the rhythmic scraping of your spoon against the wood, the only sound, warm, filling, but devoid of any real flavor. It's sustenance, not pleasure. Reality of a serf's diet in the year of our Lord 1348, a year that would later be remembered for the devastating arrival of the Black Death, a plague that would sweep across Europe, lives regardless of social standing. But for now, the immediate threat is the slow, grinding poverty of daily life. After the meager meal, Eleanor begins her evening chores. She mends a torn tunic with nimble fingers, the needle a glint of metal in the firelight. You, meanwhile, are tasked with preparing for the next day. You check the worn leather straps on your boots, ensuring they are still sound enough to withstand the rigors of the fields. Scythe, the rhythmic rasp of the whetstone, a familiar sound, a ritualistic preparation for the endless cycle of labor. The air is growing colder, and the shadows in the hut deepen, swallowing the corners of the room. Understanding deepens as you consider the sheer, unyielding sameness of it all. There are no grand adventures, pronouncements, no sudden windfalls of fortune. Life is a steady, predictable march from sunrise to sunset, planting to harvest, from birth to death. You recall overhearing a conversation between 2 older men, John and Robert, as they toiled in the Lord's meadows. "Did you hear about Thomas the miller's son?" John had grumbled, his brow with a grimy sleeve. He ran off to join a band of mercenaries, tired of this life. Robert had spat on the ground. "Foolish boy, what future is there for a man without land, without a lord to protect him? He'll end up begging or dead in a ditch." You understood their sentiment. Escaping this life, of seeking something more, was a dangerous fantasy. It was a rebellion against the established order, fabric of society. The feudal system, with its intricate web of obligations and allegiances, keep you exactly where you were, bound to the land, bound to the Lord. It was a system that, providing a degree of stability, also stifled any glimmer of individual ambition or aspiration. This was the reality of your existence, predictable toil, punctuated by the occasional hardship of a poor harvest or the imposition of a new tax. You look at Eleanor, the wariness of a life lived in service. She catches your gaze and offers a faint, tired smile. It's a smile that speaks of shared burdens, of quiet resilience. You feel a pang of something akin to affection, a deep, spoken bond forged in the crucible of shared hardship. Your understanding deepens as the fire begins to die down, casting long shadows across the walls. The embers glow like sleepy eyes, mirroring the fatigue that is settling over you. Woolen tunic tighter around yourself, the coarse fabric scratching against your skin. The straw mattress, simple pile of dried reeds, awaits. Sleep is not an escape, but a necessary prelude to another day of the same. You close your eyes, sounds of the night, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustling of unseen creatures in the thatch lulling you into a state of semi-consciousness. The cycle is about to begin anew. You are a cog in a vast, unyielding machine, and tomorrow you will turn again. As you settle in tonight, let me transport you to a world both alien and achingly familiar. The day's labor, a relentless cycle of toil under the unforgiving sun of 85 in the English countryside near the manor of Oakhaven, has drawn to a close. The air, the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, bleating of sheep and the lowing of oxen being guided back to their buyers. You, as Thomas, a serf bound to the land, shed your rough-spun tunic, its coarse fibers still holding the day's sweat and the faint aroma of manure. Linen against your skin offers little comfort, but it's all you have. The world around you evolves of your wattle, and Dob Hut offers a sanctuary of sorts from the encroaching twilight. The walls, plastered with mud and straw, are cool and damp to the touch. A major fire crackles in the central hearth, flickering shadows that dance across the low ceiling. The air inside is heavy with the smell of stale bread, unwashed bodies, present aroma of animal dung from the small, lean. To attach to the dwelling, a single cow and a few chickens are housed, a vital source of sustenance and a small measure of security against the gnawing hunger that is a constant companion. A woman whose face is etched with the same wariness that marks your own, moves with quiet efficiency, stirring a pot of thin pottage made from barley and whatever root vegetables she could forage. Of a wooden bowl against the rough, hewn table is the loudest sound. Your evening meal is a silent affair. The pottage, watery, fills your stomach, but offers little true nourishment. You chew slowly, grit of the barley and the faint bitterness of the turnip. The silence between you and Eleanor is not one of shared intimacy, exhaustion and a profound lack of words to express the unspoken. What is there to say? Tomorrow will be the same as today. The rhythm of the seasons dictates your life, the sowing and reaping, the endless tending of the Lord's fields, the meager scraps that are your due. You remember, vaguely, a time before this utter stillness, a flickering memory of a childhood dream. It was to see the bustling market town of Winchester, a place spoken of in hushed tones by travelling peddlers, stone buildings and endless stalls. But such aspirations, if they ever truly existed, since been ground to dust by the relentless realities of your existence. The concept of a personal future, ambition or desire beyond mere survival is as foreign to you as the silks and spices described by those same peddlers. You are a tool, and your purpose is defined by the needs of the manor, not by any internal yearning. The world around you evolves on your straw-filled pallet, wool blanket offering scant warmth against the chill that seeps through the packed earth floor. Your thoughts drift, or rather, they cease to drift at all. There is no contemplation of the day's events, no planning for the morrow, no anxieties or hopes. It is a void, profound stillness that settles over your mind like a shroud. You are not dreaming of grand adventures, wrestling with existential questions. There is simply nothing. Thought is as palpable as the ache in your weary bones. I discovered in the archives of the Bodleian Library of manorial court rolls from the late 13th century a recurring entry: Thomas, son of William, 1 penny for failing to mend the Lord's fence. This seemingly minor infraction speaks volumes about the constant, meticulous oversight and the petty punishments that characterized serfdom. My research into the daily lives of these individuals, fragmented records and archaeological findings, paints a picture not of romanticized rural idyls lived at the very edge of subsistence, governed by the dictates of lords and the church, with little room for personal agency. Stirs beside you, her breathing a soft, rhythmic sound in the darkness. You reach out, your calloused hand finding hers, of passion, a mere acknowledgement of shared existence. It is not an act of love, but of habit, of a deep companionship born of necessity. You feel the rough texture of her skin, the familiar warmth of her body pressed against yours. There are no whispered endearments, no plans for a future beyond the next harvest. The shared warmth is simply another facet of survival. The world around you evolves. The faint scent of damp straw and the lingering aroma of wood smoke fill your nostrils. The rhythmic chirping of crickets outside the hut is a lullaby of the natural world, a sound that has accompanied your sleep for as long as you can remember. There is no wrestling with the subconscious tapestry of dreams to unravel. Your mind, like your life, is a landscape of uncultivated fields, purpose that will never arrive. The silence within your skull is absolute, profound emptiness that mirrors the stark simplicity of your days. This is not a rest that rejuvenates, oblivion that merely postpones the inevitable return to the arduous reality of your existence. Subtle shift in the quality of the darkness, the faintest hint of grey at the edges of the horizon, signals the approaching dawn. Accustomed to this unceasing cycle, begins to stir, not from a desire to greet the new day, the ingrained instinct of the labourer, the profound lack of internal life, absence of dreams, or even the simple yearning for something more, leaves you utterly unprepared for what the day will bring new. As the first rays of sunlight begin to pierce the small opening in your hut, dust motes dancing in the still air, you prepare to rise to face another day in this most unvarying of lives. No escape, not even in sleep. The deep, unyielding stillness of your slumber is, perhaps, testament to the utter lack of internal experience that defined your existence as a medieval serf, a life that, in its deepest rest, was devoid of the very essence of being. Tonight, we're going to experience history not from textbooks, the harsh realities of a life so distant, so utterly alien to our own, are about to melt away, leaving behind a profound, overwhelming sense of relief. We've journeyed through the monotonous days, the backbreaking labour, the gnawing hunger, cating lack of agency. We've felt the damp chill seep into our bones, present aroma of wood smoke and unwashed bodies, and tasted the coarse, unvaried fare. We've heard the lowing of oxen, sheep, and the endless, droning chants from the distant church, same muddy track leading to the same cluster of wattle and daub huts, the same imposing, yet distant, of the manor house. This has been your life, day in and day out, for what felt like an eternity. Experience becomes your teacher. Unyielding teacher it has been, the relentless cycle of dawn to dusk, the ceaseless toil in the fields under the indifferent gaze of the sun, the constant, level anxiety about harvest yields and the Lord's demands. It all coalesces into a single, overwhelming truth. Profoundly uneventful existence imaginable. There are no grand adventures, no dramatic twists of fate, exhilarating escape. There is only the enduring, the predictable, the utterly mundane. You've learned that the greatest excitement of the week is the arrival of the travelling peddler, and stale gossip offer a fleeting glimpse of a world beyond your immediate horizon. You've discovered that even fear, companion, becomes a dull achy rather than a sharp terror, worn down by its ceaseless presence. Progress is an alien one. Life is a static tableau, unchanging from one generation to the next. You recall, with a shiver that has nothing to do with the lingering chill of the night, the conversation you had with Agnes, the baker's wife. Her hands, gnarled and stained with flour, moved with a practiced, wary rhythm as she kneaded dough. For the manor, she'd sighed, her voice raspy from years of dusty air, and a few smaller ones for us. Holds out, that is. Her eyes, deep set and perpetually tired, held no spark of ambition, no flicker of dreams. Baked for her mother, she'd continued, a faint, almost imperceptible shrug of her shoulders, and my daughter will bake for hers. It is the way. You had nodded, echoing the silent understanding that permeated every interaction. There was no striving, no yearning for something more. Personal fulfillment of pursuing one's passions would have been utterly incomprehensible, perhaps even dangerous. I discovered in the archives of the Bodleian Library, in a collection of manorial court rolls from the early 14th century, from the norm, even minor ones, were often met with swift and severe punishment. Serf caught trying to sell his own produce directly, rather than through the lord, could face fines, confiscation of goods, chastisement. The system was designed for stability, not for individual flourishing. The days blur into weeks, the seasons dictate everything. Spring brings the backbreaking work of ploughing and sowing, anticipation of a good yield. Summer is a relentless grind of weeding and tending, the sun beating down, stinging your eyes. Autumn is the frantic rush of harvest, the communal effort to bring in the crops before the rains, followed by the meager distribution of the Lord's share. Winter is a time of enforced idleness, of huddling around major fires, of rationing dwindling supplies, and praying for the thaw. You've seen Thomas, the young ploughman, his face perpetually streaked with dirt, stooped from years of labour, his conversation revolving around the price of wool and the health of his ox, Bess. Carved Eleanor, the weaver, her fingers nimble, but her spirit seemingly as worn as the thread she spins. The constant damp that made her bones ache, their lives are a mirror of your own, a testament to the pervasive sameness. Now, as the first hint of dawn begins to paint the eastern sky, a different kind of sensation begins to stir within you. The familiar ache of weary muscles or the dull throb of hunger. It's something lighter, feels like a loosening of a tightly bound knot. The scent of damp earth and wood smoke, defining aromas of your existence, now seem distant, almost unreal. You can almost feel the crisp of your own time filling your lungs, the smooth texture of modern fabric against your skin, the oppressive weight of the Lord's omnipresent gaze, the fear of the bailiff's heavy hand. Crushing monotony, it all begins to recede, like a tide going out. You remember the simple act of choosing what to eat, walk down any path you desire, the ability to simply think without the constant threat of reprisal. This transition, shedding of the medieval skin, is not a violent tearing away, but a gentle unfurling. The harsh, unyielding reality of serfdom is fading by the comforting, if sometimes overwhelming, familiarity of your own world. The sheer, unadulterated relief is a palpable thing, a wave washing over you. You realize with a clarity that stings just how much you've taken for granted. The ability to read a book, to music, a conversation that isn't dictated by the immediate needs of survival. These are luxuries that the serf could never even conceive of. Glorious, mind-numbing boredom of your own modern life suddenly seems like an unimaginable paradise. You've learned that the greatest comfort is not in grand achievements, but in the quiet, uninterrupted continuation of your own existence. Vestiges of the medieval dawn fade, and the familiar glow of your own world begins to assert itself. You feel a profound sense of gratitude, a deep, abiding appreciation for the mundane. The journey back to the present is not just a return,